Good afternoon and welcome to USDA's Spring Data Users Meeting. My name is Lance Honig. I serve as chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board here at NASS. I'm going to serve as your moderator for today's events. Obviously, we're glad that you're here joining us, whether you're in person here in Chicago or the many, many guests that we have joining us online. It's always a great opportunity for us not only to share some information with you about what's happening at our individual agencies here at USDA, but maybe more important, it's our opportunity to hear from you, to hear the concerns you have, the questions that you have, whatever it might be, gathering feedback from you, our valued partners and customers. Obviously, we don't want to, well, it did work. All right. 1 second. There we go. All right. Obviously, we don't want to spend too much time with me just talking up here, but obviously we have a few housekeeping items that we have to go over, just like we would for any event, because we do have both in-person and virtual component to this. Some of these things might apply to you, some may not. But for our folks who have joined virtually today, we are offering closed captioning services. If you find it difficult to hear the discussion, you might find that helpful. At the bottom of your screen, you should see on the ribbon there a closed captioning button you can click. So hopefully that will help you out there. Just as we've done in years past, we do plan to post the recording of this event, as well as the slides that'll be shared here today, and then also the Q&A. And so those will all be posted on our website not too long after the meeting. Hopefully either later this week or early next week, we'll get that all posted out there. That also means, just as we've done in years past, if there happen to be more questions than we're able to answer in today's session, we'll make sure we get those all answered and posted out on the web with those documents at the time. Speaking of questions, as we go through that, I will try to balance the questions that we get between the room and the virtual participants that we have. So we'll kind of bounce back and forth there. I'll probably remind you again, but for those of you in the room, we're going to need to make sure that when you ask a question, that you use the microphone, because if you don't use the microphone, there's two problems. One, the folks online will have no idea what question you asked. And number two, it won't be captured on the recording. And so if anybody goes back to watch later on, they would not be able to hear that. So please remember to do that. Along those same lines, since we're talking about questions, if you have any for our online participants, you'll see the Q&A button. That's where we would like you to put the questions that you have. In fact, you can start posting in there as soon as you'd like. There is also a chat button, as you know, in Zoom. We would prefer that you reserve chat for any technical type questions that you have. If you're having any issues with sound or video or things of that nature, that would be the appropriate place for you to post any kind of issues that you might have relative to chat. You'll also notice that we have an email address on the screen for you. If you really have any problems that get a little bit complicated, you might find it easier to just email Vincent Davis directly. You can see his email there. He'll do everything he can to try to help get things squared away for you. In fact, along those same lines, if you happen to know somebody who's trying to join, who didn't register, send an email to Vincent and he will be happy to get them set up so that they can join as well. Speaking of problems, we certainly hope we don't have any problems here in the room, but should anything catastrophic happen, if we have to, for example, stop the virtual session and restart, we'll be reaching out with any appropriate link information or things of that nature through the email address that you used when you registered originally for the virtual session. All right. So let's talk about what's going to happen here today. Those of you that have been here in the past, you're going to find this is very similar to the approach we've taken in the past. After I finish just a few more comments here, I'll be turning things over to our distinguished panelists up here who are going to share some information about things that are happening within their individual agencies. You can see we'll then transition into our open forum, or as I like to call it, live Q&A. We'll do that for pretty much the remainder of the meeting. We will build a break in, so there will be a 20-minute break built into there. So you will have an opportunity to get up and stretch, take a little bit of a break there. You'll notice we're kind of looking to wrap things up toward 4:15 or something like that. We have to be done and finished by 4:30 Central Time here. So when we start to approach that time, I will be bringing things to a close. So just FYI, that's kind of the timeline we're looking at. And then before I kind of point more toward my panelist friends to my left here, I just wanted to mention that we do have a few distinguished guests joining us online. First of all, I'm not sure if he's been able to get on just yet, but we are expecting USDA's FSA Administrator, Zach Ducheneau, to be joining us online. We have some folks from Stats Canada, as well as the Agricultural Estimates agencies down in Mexico joining us. And then also, maybe more specifically relevant to any questions you have, we do have staff from both RMA and EIA joining us online. They'll be able to assist with any questions that you might have that are relative to the work that they do. And of course, even our distinguished folks up here have some support online as well. And so if need be, we may reach out to some of those folks as well to kind of make sure we get everything answered. So welcome to all of those extra folks who are joining us today to help things out. All right, so as we look to my left here and think about what's going to happen here in just a few moments, basically they're just going to run through a few highlights for each of their agencies. But this is my opportunity to give you just a few final reminders before we let them talk with you. All right, so for folks out in the virtual world, with your reminder email that came from Marissa earlier this week, probably yesterday, you should have received an attached file that looked like the book that my friends here in the room probably have in front of them. It probably will contain even more detail than what our panelists are going to share here today. So you may want to refer to that as you're preparing for any questions you might have. As I mentioned earlier, if you are on the web, feel free to start posting your questions in the Q&A now. And then my last reminder is actually to our panelists, both in the room and online. I would ask that you please don't answer the questions in the Q&A because if you do, they're going to disappear and I'm not going to see them. And then they will not get publicly asked and everyone will not have that opportunity. So with that, that's the last reminders and last housekeeping items that I have. So Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you and I would just ask that each of our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves when your turn comes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Packnett. I'm the Deputy Administrator in the Global Market Analysis Program area in the Foreign Agricultural Service. And it's great to be back here in Chicago for the Data Users Meeting. Just want to take a minute to thank NASS for pulling this meeting together. It takes a lot of work and significant effort, and all of our agencies here benefit from this opportunity to have an exchange with the users. So kudos and thank you to NASS for pulling this meeting together over the years. There are not many new developments on the data front for FAS, especially with our primary databases. You know, you're familiar with the PS&D, GATS, GAIN database, and export sales are basically unchanged. We continue to work hard to maintain the quality of the data as well as to maintain the systems that you use to access this information. We've talked about export sales at our last couple of meetings here, but I just want to reiterate that our team continues to work with our IT contractors to upgrade the system that exporters use to report their activity. And that our team uses internally to consolidate that data to be able to provide you with the weekly reports as well as the daily reports. As you may recall, we tried to change the way that the data was collected from the exporters, and that new approach was unsuccessful when we attempted to launch back in August of 2022. At that time, we reverted to our legacy system. The upgrade that we're working on now will move us onto a new and more current technology platform. Going to modernize the data collection, allow the users more automation options, and will also help improve our internal operations. But importantly, the exporters will be reporting using the same aggregated data approach that they have always have. And there will be ample testing with the exporters before we attempt to launch the new system again. From a data user's perspective, we intend to launch a new system with the same functionality that you currently have, including the same reports. We will have an improved query system, and you'll also have access to the APIs that you're accustomed to. On the data user side, we will also conduct user acceptance testing with the data users well before the system is launched, just to make sure that everyone can access the data that they're used to and need for their purposes. We expect to launch the new system next year, 2025, probably later in the year. It's been raised a couple of times at this meeting that our geospatial crop monitoring tools that we have available from FAS aren't well linked to our FAS website. So we've kind of took that under advisement, and we've been working to try to remedy that situation. So you'll notice on our website now, we have a geospatial tab that's in our data and analysis page. That tab will take you to 6 apps that include Gaddis, Crop Explorer, and some of the other tools that we have there. So we hope that's an improvement. But we have more work planned to better integrate those tools into our FAS website. So stay tuned for additional improvements there. Also related to Gaddis, that application has some new features, including a new vegetation index, also heat damage days, and some soil moisture data sets. Also want to highlight that FAS will be returning an agricultural attaché to Kyiv, Ukraine, and that officer is expected to arrive later this month. Our Ukraine office has continued to fulfill all of our mandatory gain commodity reporting requirements. We posted 35 public reports since the start of the war. And our new attaché going there will continue the excellent reporting that we're getting out of that office, in addition to taking care of other responsibilities related to our agricultural relationship with Ukraine. Beginning in June of last year, we began releasing a new product on our web site called Trade Spotlight. We're doing that monthly. And the Trade Spotlight is a new publication that's similar to the ERS chart of notes, features a graph and a short summary of various noteworthy trade developments. Some of the examples that we've written about there include the growing importance of ethanol exports for industrial uses. We've had rapid growth in pet food exports to China that was featured, and we also had a feature on record soybean meal exports. So if you're following the FAS alerts, if you are signed up for that, then you should be receiving a link to these monthly highlights. And that's all that I have to highlight from FAS, but look forward to engaging with the Q&As later this afternoon.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. And good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, if I can, I have a few slides to share here with you all today. So my name is Mark Jekanowski. I'm the chairman of the World Agricultural Outlook Board. And I'm just going to give you a quick recap of who we are and what we do. As you probably know, the World Board is basically known publicly for one thing, and that is that we put out the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report every month. We have a fairly lean team. We're a team of about 22 people, including 5 meteorologists. But you know, we coordinate information from across USDA. So all the folks on the panel up here with me today, including a few other agencies that are online, contribute to the WASD process, and the World Board chairs these interagency commodity estimates committees that are basically in charge of bringing all the information together, bringing all the information to the table, and approving, clearing the final numbers that go into the WASD. So we have six commodity chairs listed there. Just want to draw your attention to two of them, because two have changed since we met last year at this time. First of all, on oilseeds, Keith Menzie retired, and we have Joanna Hitchner. If you want to raise your hand, Joanna. Joanna is now the, and has been for almost a year now, the chair of the Oilseeds Committee. And then on cotton, our longtime chair, Steve McDonald, retired about a month ago. So that's a position. We have an acting, Hunter Colby is in there, acting right now. We put out a job announcement for that position, got a good, strong candidate list. We'll be interviewing for that position in the weeks ahead and hope to have that filled here as soon as possible as well. So we're about to kick off the new year at the World Board, as you might be aware, but again, just as a reminder, May is the month where we put out our first official estimates for the new crop year. So now we're going to be focusing on the 2024-2025 season. Usually in May, that's also the month where we would incorporate any major changes to our data tables and methodologies and whatnot. This year we have no changes to the tables to report, so nothing there will change from the current setup. And then finally, I mentioned the WASD. We also are in charge. The World Board is also in charge of coordinating the Agricultural Outlook Forum. So we had the 100th annual Agricultural Outlook Forum this past February 15th and 16th. We got great feedback. Felt like it was a huge success. Had about 1,400 people in person in the room, which is roughly back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of in-person participation. But since we've been, since the pandemic, we've also been live streaming the forum, and this year we had about 5,000 virtual participants as well. So the pandemic kind of forced us into learning how to do these things online, and turned out to be a great success and a good service to the public, and really expanded the participation and outreach for the forum. So that's something that's going to continue going forward. And with that, all of the sessions, even though the forum happened a month ago, all of the sessions will remain online. You can view the live streams for up until February of next year. So the live streamed sessions will remain up for just about a year. We had attendees from all 50 states, about 88 countries, and they represented all segments of the value chain. So again, being able to do this virtually has greatly expanded the reach and participation generally. And finally, with that, I would say you can go ahead and mark your calendars for 2025, the 101st Agricultural Outlook Forum, February 27th and 28th. Note that will be 2 weeks later than it was this year, and it is 1 week later than it historically has been the week of President's Day. Just because of scheduling with the hotel, we've had to shift things around these past couple of years and up into next year. But so mark your calendar, February 27th and 28th. Hope to see you there, either hopefully in person, or if not, if you can't get there in person, we'll welcome you virtually as well. And that is all I've got.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Troy Joshua. I am the director of our NASS Statistics Division, as well as the executive director for the Agricultural Statistics Board. After 44 years of government service, Hubert Hamer decided to retire as NASS administrator at the end of last month. Joe Parsons is currently acting administrator until the department announced a new administrator for NASS. Today, I have with me three individuals to assist me. I have Nick Streff. He is acting chief of the crops branch. I also have with me Travis Averill, is the chief of the livestock branch. And I have also Brian Combs, chief of the environmental economics and demographics branch. We were surprised today to have Melanie Valentine. She's an intern for us. She has been an intern for 2 summers. And she also has surprised us, and she's attending. She doesn't realize that she's going to be answering some questions as well. So as we all know, NASS publishes over 400 reports on an annual basis, in addition to the Census of Agriculture. The mission of our agency is to provide timely, accurate, and useful statistics to the agricultural communities. On February 13, NASS is very proud that we published the 2022 Census of Agriculture. There are over 6 million data points. The information was published at the national level, state, as well as county. After releasing the Census of Agriculture, NASS plans to publish the final estimates for several commodities, as well as we conducted a very thorough program review. Today, I will share with you some information pertaining to our crops, livestock, environmental economics and demographics, as well as some information pertaining towards the Census of Agriculture. On January 3rd, NASS released final estimates for covering 5 years of data for the citrus fruits, non-citrus fruits and nuts, and vegetables, and all of this information is available on Quick Stats. On January 9th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for field crops, potatoes and sweet potatoes, rice stocks, and stocks of grain, oilseeds, and hay. On February 16th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for crop values. On February 23rd, NASS released final estimates covering data for corn for silage and grain, sorghum, and soybeans. And that information was at the county level. It's our county estimates. On March 8th, NASS released final estimates for 5 years of data for rice county estimates. And on March 15th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for barley, oats, and wheat. That information is available at the county level. That's when we published that. And now transitioning over to livestock. On January 11th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for hogs and pigs. And on February 2nd, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for milk cows and production, as well as sheep and goats. On March 5th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for chickens and eggs. And on April 8th, NASS released final estimates covering 5 years of data for honey. And like I stated before, that information is going to be available on Quick Stats. And that's 3 reports that's upcoming in livestock. On April 29th, NASS plans to release final estimates for meat animals, production, disposition, and income. The second one is milk production, disposition, and income. And the last one will be poultry production and values. And as I mentioned before, that information is going to be available on Quick Stats. Now I'd like to transition over to livestock and share information pertaining towards the program review. On July 19th, NASS plans to reduce publication for mink pelts produced and females bred to produce kits by states for mink. But not only that, we will no longer provide published data for published state level data by color class. On December 23rd, NASS plans to reduce the number of published states for hogs and pigs from 50 states down to 16 states. The 16 states are Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, and Texas. The 34 non-published states will be included in the other categories. So we will continue to publish a US number that includes all 50 states. In January 2025, NASS plans to reduce the number of published states for cattle for 50 states to 31 states, but we will continue to publish for all 50 states. All cattle and calves inventory, all cows inventory, and calf crops. The 19 states that we will not publish for other categories in the publication are Alaska, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Indiana, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Carolina, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Utah, Vermont, and West Virginia. In January of 2025, NASS plans to reduce the number of published states for quarterly milk production from 50 states down to 33 states. The 17 non-published states will be Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Montana, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Dakota, Rhode Island, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Wyoming. The 17 non-published states will be included in the all other states category. Need to go back to that. In January of 2025, NASS plans to reduce the number of published states for goat meats from 28 states to 26 states. Nebraska and Wisconsin will be published, and previously they were not. The non-published states will be Louisiana, New York, Washington, and West Virginia. They will be accounted in the other states category. And NASS plans to increase the number of published states for goats milked from 29 states to 30 states. So we plan on publishing Nevada. Now, recently we have sent out a ASB notice, a notification, basically informing the public that due to budget constraints, NASS will discontinue the following programs. NASS will discontinue small grain and row crop county estimates beginning with the 2024 crop year. NASS will also discontinue objective yield programs in 2024. NASS will discontinue all livestock county estimates for the 2024 year. NASS will not collect data nor publish data for the July cattle report. Transitioning over to the environmental economics and demographics. On April 28th of 2023, the monthly agricultural prices was released that uses the updated annual benchmark methodology for all monthly prices paid indices. We also, on May 12th, we released the field crops chemical use data, and on July 19th, we published the vegetable chemical use data. And on October 25th, we published the county estimates cash rent data that was released. On February 13th, 2024, NASS released the final estimates covering 5 years of data for farms and landing farms. That information was published on QuickStats. And on April 4th, we released the final estimates 5-year revision for land values. And as before, that information was available on QuickStats only. Now transitioning over to the Census of Agriculture, and just to provide you some information pertaining towards that, As we are very proud, NASS published the Census of Agriculture on February 13th. And over the coming months, NASS will release other data products. The statistical products include data from watersheds, the American Indian Reservation. Additionally, we will be repackaging the Census of Agriculture data to include state and county profiles, producers' demographic profiles, as well as congressional district profiles and rankings. And currently, we are preparing the Census of Agriculture for Puerto Rico, and that is scheduled to be published on July 18th. As part of the Census of Agriculture program, NASS began collecting data for the American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have two follow-on studies that we are conducting. One of them is the 2023 Irrigation and Water Management Study that data collection started in January of 2023. And this study is an integral part of the Census of Agriculture because it collects information on a wide area on irrigation topics. But not only that, but we also collecting data on the 2023 Census of Aquaculture. And data collection began in December of 2023. And the primary purpose of that Census of Aquaculture is to provide inventory on production and value of sales for the distribution of fish products. And that information will be released in December 16th of 2024. I have provided you a lot of information that shared information, what we have updated as well as what we plan to do. And all of these reports are available online, as well as you can reach us by phone and asking us any questions. And if you so desire, you can reach us by the email and send us email, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to any questions, comments, or concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Let's see. Here we go. So hi, everyone. My name is Kelly McGuire. I am the Assistant Administrator and Chief Data Officer for USDA's Economic Research Service. Thank you to NASS and the team for including us in this panel. This is always a great opportunity for us to hear your questions and to share some of the information about things that have been happening at ERS over the last 6 to 12 months. So just for those who may be new or need to be refamiliarized with the ERS mission. Our mission statement is stated here. We provide objective, timely information and research across the broad spectrum of the USDA mission. So we do work in the space of commodity markets and trade, on rural America, the environment, and food access and nutrition programs. One thing that I like to note about this mission statement here is that the information that we provide is intended to be objective, and that means that it's policy neutral. We are one of the 13 federal statistical agencies, along with our sister agency within the department, NASS, as well as some of the other participants in this meeting. And the purpose of the statistical system is that the information that's provided is in fact policy neutral, and so it can be used to inform decision-making across the, in our case, agricultural sector. And so we take that very seriously in the work that we do. All of our work is peer-reviewed. We try to be as transparent as possible in the way we go about our methods and our analysis. And this meeting is one of those opportunities for us to share that kind of information with you. So just a little bit about, what we did in fiscal year 2023, some statistics about what we did, what we were up to. So we produced about 169 publications. Those include some of the you might be familiar with, some of our deep dive research reports. They're called economic research reports or economic information bulletins. There's a few other flavors of those reports. They tend to take a particular topic area and dive very deeply into them. And then from that, you can pull out the information that you might need depending on what you're interested in that subject matter. Our staff are primarily economists and other analysts, and they're expected as part of their jobs to stay abreast of the scientific advances in the field and to contribute in that way. And they do this primarily by publishing within the peer review literature relevant for our field. And our staff produced about 100 journal articles. So this adds to the body of evidence that can be used to inform decision-making in the agricultural sector. And then we had a number of webinars that we did. Some of them are routine webinars that we do every year. So for instance, 3 times a year, we put out a farm income forecast, and we always do a webinar associated with that. And other webinars are things that we do that we think it might be a topic that is of particular interest on a report that we may be releasing. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do a public webinar. We'd love to do more of these. They just are a big lift for us to put together. And so we have to be a little bit selective in those that we do. Let's see, reports. So we put about, I said there were 169 products. That's across a variety of different ways in which we communicate. These reports are those deep dives that I was mentioning, those economic research reports or economic information bulletins. Here's just a selection of some of the titles. There's more details about these and others in the booklet that you received associated with this. They're all available online. Some of the, you'll see across the subject matter here that we are, we're looking at everything from different types of trade issues, agricultural productivity. We did a report on the federal financial risk from climate change associated with the livestock disaster forage program. That was an interesting piece. It also formed a part of the president's budget, the president's FY25 budget, looking at federal financial climate risk. We plan to continue to do a little bit more work in that area as well. And then we recently did a report on the rural-urban mortality gap, and so differences in death rates across rural-urban divide, which is an important topic in terms of rural development and work that happens in that space. Data product updates. So we produce about 80 different data products every year. These are all available on our website in different formats that you can download, access, and use. A lot of them are updated on a monthly basis alongside the situation and outlook reports that we do in collaboration with the World Ag Outlook Board. And as well as a lot of different other areas and topic spaces. So what I've listed here are ones that have been updated recently. A couple of items to note alongside those data products is that we're constantly working towards modernization and introducing modern tools for both downloading and using those data, as well as a lot of the behind the scenes work that will enable us to produce those data products more quickly and more efficiently. It's kind of the backbone of the agency. It's not the work that you see necessarily in terms of public facing, except for we intend or hope that all of these kinds of modernization investments that we're making as an agency, which can range from things like bringing data into different, updated coding so that processing can happen in hours instead of days, reducing manual entry of data. And so we're constantly moving through each of our data products and introducing those modern features with the intent that we're delivering the data to the users quickly, more efficiently, as accurately as possible with reduced errors and such. And so that's just an ongoing effort. I think I mention that every time that we're here, and here are some of the data products in which we've engaged in some of that work more recently. Data visualizations. This is another way in which we communicate. And so these are more interactive ways to engage with our data. So we, when we engage with a particular subject matter, we have a variety of communication tools we use in order to get that information out to the users. And so some of it is with our reports that I mentioned. Some of it is with the accompanying data products, which, like I mentioned, can range from Excel files or other machine readable format of data. Another way we do this is through these data visualizations. They tend to be done through the Tableau platform, and they allow you to interact with the data a little bit more in more of a tailored manner for what you need. And so whether or not it's a drop-down menu, you can look at things by state, different time series of different commodities and such. And so we're continually thinking about new ways in which we can produce these and maintain them and update them. And so I encourage you, if you have an interest in that, you can go to our website, and we have, I think there's 60 of them that are available now in terms of data visualizations. Charts of note. So I mentioned this in the past before. Charts of note in FAS, I love that they're using that concept in terms of their trade spotlights. I can't wait to go look at those myself. But the charts of note are kind of the gateway to ERS research. So there's a mobile app that you can download on your iPhone or your Android device. The charts of note is a longtime product that we have. They come out Monday through Friday. It's one chart with 250 words of text. The beautiful thing about this app is that you can search it. I use it a lot myself. And so in addition to the charts just being pushed out to you on a daily basis, so you can just kind of glance at them, see if it's something that interests you. The app also has a search feature. So for instance, if I, trying to remember or think about what we've done, say with pork markets, I can type pork into the search feature. They'll pull up all the charts that we've done in the entire library regarding that topic. And then I can scan them. And then there's a link to the actual source material from which the chart is drawn in order to get a deeper dive. And so that's why I call it the gateway. It's just a great feature that we have. I'll have a few examples here in a minute of those charts. But I also wanted to mention on the left side of this slide here is a picture from our 2023 Amber Waves in Review. So Amber Waves is our digital magazine, if you will. We used to print it, but it's a digital format now. The articles within the Amber Waves take one of our deep dive research reports and they synthesize that information. It's intended to be in perhaps a bit of a less technical format and really pulling out the key points of that research report. So you don't necessarily have to wade through the 50 pages. You can get kind of a 10-page highlight. If you want more information, there's a way to access that. And in 2022, we've brought back what had previously been a longstanding publication within the agency, and that is a year in review, where we're taking about 12 to 15 of those articles. They tend to be the ones that are most popular, whether the most popular downloaded, or we've given a lot of briefings on them or had a lot of traffic on them, and they're synthesizing them in this format. I've made a note to myself to ask that we print more next year because we've run out of the copies. Otherwise, I would have brought them with me and you could all have gone home with one of these beautiful publications. So note to self, next year I'll I'll have more for you to take home. So charts of note, here's just some examples. I won't walk through them here. The intent though with these charts of note is that the picture is intended to give you the story. So we really work hard to make sure that you should be able to look at the graphic and get something out about the story here. These are some examples of the recent charts of note. They're always drawn from our current research. So we release a report and then we tend to go ahead and release a chart of note at the same exact time. It's a way, kind of goes on social media. If you're at the USDA buildings, it's often displayed on the televisions that are throughout the building, and other ways for folks to get that information. I did want to specifically note a series of charts of note that we've just started doing in collaboration with NASS and the release of the 2022 census. So once a week since the census was released, we've been putting out a chart of note that highlights some of those recent census data, as well as some ERS research related to it. And so this was the first one that was released on farmland and number of farms. And we've been continuing to release those. And we'll do that sort of as long as we kind of feel like the material is fresh and useful for folks. Emerging issues, there's always a lot on the horizon that we're looking at and engaging with. I won't go into a lot of details here, but these are some of the topic areas that we've been exploring just of late and put out some recent information on. And then coming soon, we're calling these Farm Bill First Fridays. These are going to be short Amber Waves articles that we're going to start putting out very soon. In fact, I believe maybe even next week might be the first one. And they're related to the different titles in the Farm Bill, intended to provide information on research ERS has done that could be informative for Farm Bill discussions. And I'm sorry, I had a couple more here. Expanding data accessibility. That's always, I think I've mentioned that a few times throughout my remarks, so I won't go into a lot of detail here, but these are different ways in which we do outreach to the user community, timely research, different ways to follow us on social media. And so with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Lance for FSI.
Turn the clicker back over to me, but we're actually going to transition to our next panelist who is joining us virtually. So I believe, Tim, you're up next. If you can go ahead and share your slides. I'll try to make sure I move them, or Marissa hopefully will move them for me so that we keep pace for you.
Hey, thank you, Lance. Thank you, NASS. It's really an honor to be here with you and this group of panelists and attendees today. My name is Tim Gravlin. I'm Farm Service Agency's Data and Analytics Officer. I want to go through some data modernization and some updates that we have from our service agency today. First off, I just want to let you know FSA is making significant improvements in our data modernization. We're migrating from legacy on-premise solutions with proprietary hardware that are reaching their end of life. We're adopting the U.S. Department of Agriculture's enterprise data analytics platform and tool set, which they call EDAP, based on Amazon Web Services. We're investing millions of dollars in that to modernize our data platforms, build automated data pipelines that'll support enterprise reporting, allow for sharing of data between different agencies within the USDA, as well as some of the visualizations like Kelly mentioned, dashboards and other data products that will help improve data transparency inside USDA as well as external. So we're going to go through a few of those today. There's a few things that are new since we last met in October. We're going to get started with FSA's largest portfolio, which is called Farm Programs. Since we last met, we had the Conservation Reserve Program's annual payment run. That payment run paid out more than $1.7 billion to producers. You can see here some important improvements that have happened since 2021 on the Conservation Reserve Program. There's much more detail in your handout. There's some smart climate and conservation improvements to the program, some important partnerships that we have made with tribal communities, which I believe is on the next slide, Marissa. This sort of talks about some new partnerships that we formed in outreach in the CRP program. And on the next slide, you'll see a heat map. This is a Tableau visualization of the October payment run for CRP. The states that are darker show more payments, the darker shading, and the top 5 states are listed there in terms of payments out to CRP participants. Next, I'm going to talk with you about the Emergency Relief Program, or what we call ERP. Initial payments were made for this program last summer. Just like to bring your attention, we have adjusted the payment factor and we have made additional payments under ERP in the amount of $300 million plus. On the next slide, you'll see a heat map. It shows payments to date. There's been more than 8.6 billion paid out. Marissa or Vincent, I don't know if you're able to click on that link on the left there. I want our users to be aware that there is a public dashboard that the Farm Service Agency publishes weekly on Mondays. That shows the ability to interact with FSA's data on participation and payments by commodity on the Emergency Relief Program. Yep, if you scroll down there, thank you. You can see payments by state. You can see over 300,000 applicants. And of course, with the heat map, the darker states are the most active in terms of payments and dispersed applications. If you go down a little bit lower, it will show you payments by commodity. So some of our folks may be interested in that. This is not internal to USDA. This is a public website, fsa.usda.gov, that anyone can get to. And that kind of shows you a major program that FSA has rolled out in the last year, the Emergency Relief Program. The next thing that's happened since we last talked is another flavor of ERP. It's the ERP 2022 program. This covers losses for disaster events in calendar year 2022. So that's slightly different than what we just looked at. The first Emergency Relief Program covered 2020 and 2021. So if you go to the next slide, you can see a heat map. There's $1.4 billion in payments that have been dispersed to producers already This is an ongoing program. It has not issued all its payments yet, but this gives our data users an idea of where those dollars are going, and they are significant in terms of overall dollars of 1.4 billion already dispersed on this program. The final thing I want to bring to your attention is our dairy margin coverage program. That's Farm Service Agency's largest dairy program. I just want to highlight that we have opened up the 2024 enrollment year, and that runs through April 29th. So that's important to know. That date is coming up in a few weeks. And on the next slide, I want to show you another heat map that we've done, a visualization. This is of the 2023 payments under dairy margin coverage, 277 million payments on 2023. And to date, as of last week, more than 24 million has already been paid out on the 24 program year dairy margin coverage, which is the one that's still in its sign-up period. So it's very early in that program. If you're able to click that link to the left, this is another public dashboard that our data users can get to. Just like Kelly mentioned, FSA is leveraging the Tableau platform on the EDAP from the department. And so you get to see things like this and have a little more interaction. You can drop down and change program years. You can see enrollment numbers there. We don't have 2024 up on there yet. The sign up's not even over on that, but kind of giving you a preview of how that's going so far. And if you scroll down, there's some maps and some different enrollment things that you can see. There you go. Go back in. If you click that side arrow, you'll get to a, or you can do it that way, or you can hit the home button too. All those ways will reset that if you get zoomed in so far. But the idea is not to necessarily go through these in details. You folks can play with those at home or at their place they're joining us from. It's just to highlight for you what kind of data from FSA is out there on the public web. It shows you enrollment by state, shows you payments by state, and things like that. So anyone that's interested in the dairy markets and what kind of support FSA is providing, that is a place that you can go to get to that information. Thank you for sharing that. Next, we'll switch to the other large part of FSA's portfolio. That is our farm loan programs. On the next slide, we'll see back at the end of November, which has happened, of course, since we last met in October, there was a big announcement, nearly $250 million in additional assistance for our distressed borrowers. And so that's just informational. It's something that's come up. It's significant for folks that are distressed borrowers or facing foreclosure situations or things like that. On the next slide, I want to quickly talk about the Fast Track pilot program. This is a pilot that we're running. It has the ability to make loans faster. I've got some stats on this. This is something we launched last summer in 166 offices at FSA. So far, nearly 500 loans have been processed under the Fast Track. And on average, they were processed about 6 days faster than coming in and doing it in the traditional farm loan program application. The next slide, I just want to share with you that we are now taking loan applications online. If you are able to click that link at the bottom, Marissa, this will take our folks at home to a loan assistance tool that will show them how to get more information on farm loans from FSA, as well as how to apply for farm loans online. There may be some parties in there that weren't aware of that, and we just want to bring that to their attention. That certainly an exciting tool for us anytime we build a product that our producers are able to interact with, complete, and submit online without having to come into the county office to complete. And finally, I just want to share one more thing. It is the ability for our producers to make loan payments online. We call it Pay My Loan. Right now, it's just for individual producers. It's not for entity business types or joint ventures or corporations. So we're in the process of building that out and rolling that out. Again, to service our producers and let them do business where they are on the farm without coming into the county office. Here's some stats as of last week. We've got over 400 payments that have been issued from about 300 unique producers, totaling around $3 million. And that's just since the first of the year. So we're excited about Pay My Loan. Those are the updates I had on farm programs and farm loan programs, FSA's two biggest areas. Thanks for having me today. Looking forward to questions during the open period. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Lance. I think Mike is up next.
And my apologies to the folks in the room. We didn't have the computers running these slides connected to the internet, so we weren't able to click those links. But the folks online saw them perfectly. So sorry about that. That was not the message I was trying to convey. Next, we're going to transition over to Mike Sheets over at AMS. So Mike, if you've got any links embedded, we are good to go now.
No links. So.
All right. And you're coming through well, but I would just say if you can make sure you speak up, that would be helpful for folks here too, I think.
Yeah, I've got my speaker sitting right under my my head. So thanks everybody. Marissa, you can move on to the next one. I'm here today to talk a little bit about AMS, but more specifically, something that everybody here is probably familiar with, which is Market News, the AMS Market News Service. We've been around a few years. Our primary role since our inception back in the, we actually got our start in the Ag Appropriations Act of 1914, a little line in there that essentially said collect and diffuse among the people of the United States information on the marketing of agricultural products. Our role primarily is to promote market transparency, and we do that through collecting information and publishing that on a very current basis. You can move on to the next one. We do that through, I want to focus a little bit on the data products that we do. Everybody's familiar with the reports that we put out, the information we put out. A few years ago, we've developed an internal system, which is called the Market Analysis and Reporting System, or MARS for short. For you folks out there, you only need to know that MARS is our data engine. That's the system that allows us to electronically collect the data in a standardized format, which then allows us to move on to the providing that information. Some of the ways we do that would be the My Market News site. If anybody's familiar with livestock mandatory reporting, we have the data mart there where you can access that data through that. The big heavy lifters of data out there is familiar with the APIs. That serves a useful purpose for a large volume of our users. We are moving on to data visualizations, and I'll talk a little bit more of that. Not surprising, I think you'll see that's a common theme here in the presentations today with data. And the other thing we've done is we launched our Market News mobile application a couple of years ago now, and that allows farmers to get the information right at their fingertips. I remember a time when farmers would have radios strapped to their the wheel wells of their tractors so they could listen to the farm broadcast. Well, no need for that anymore. You can actually pick up your phone and you can pull up your Market News reports in the moment. Marissa, you can move on to the next one. Some of the things that we're wanting to do with MARS this year that we're implementing, we're going to be adding all of these items now across the board. A lot of these have been, a lot of the main type products are in there. We're going to be moving on to retail reporting, the feature reporting for a range of commodities. We're going to be expanding into organic feed grains and feedstuffs. Pretty excited about that. We have Farm Bill money to promote the expansion of organic data, and that comes out of that initiative. Very excited about that. We're going to be having a new organic grain report, which is going to be far much more information than what we've previously been providing. So stay tuned for that. Going to be adding hay and sod. We're going to be adding additional cotton information. And over on our specialty crops, we're going to be adding the shipping point and movement markets. And I believe terminals is ready to go soon. Will be out there. So that's just some of the things that are going to be added to the system that currently are not in there. The long-term goal is to eventually get all the commodities into that data engine. So if you, Marissa, you can move on to the next. Our main focus is not only collecting the information. The one common theme we hear out there is that it's not enough to provide the information. We have to help our users to understand how to utilize the information. Some people use the word educate, but I would never go to a cattle producer and tell him I'm out there to educate him. We're out there to inform them about the tools that are available for them to use. And what we're doing now is we're moving towards the data visualizations as a tool that allows us to be able to take data, which is currently being provided in static report format, and make it come alive in the fingertips of the users. Marissa, you can move on to the next one. The very first report that Market News ever did that was in a data visualization format was the Cattle Contracts Library pilot program. That came out of a mandate from Congress in the Ag Appropriations Act of 2022. And that report was the first one that Market News done that was done in a visualization format. Therefore, that report doesn't exist in any kind of a static format. You go to the website, and that's how you can interact with the data. You can move on. Thank you. Now, moving on from that, Market News publishes through our state cooperative agreements and then to our own federal service. We cover over 100 some auctions across the country, livestock auctions. I'm probably underestimating. There's probably much more. But we've got all this data out there put out in dozens and dozens of reports. One of the things we tried to do is to bring all of that data together so that users could then interact with it in a more powerful, efficient way. That came out the last summer was our livestock auction dashboard. That dashboard, if you're not familiar with it, you can access it through our website. But that allows people to interact with the auction data for cattle, sheep, and goats. Now, the one nice thing about this is that a producer who might be sitting in a county in Nebraska, they can pull up and look to see, well, what are certain type of feeder cattle? What's a 600-pound medium frame heifer bringing in my area and the auctions in my area? Or they can drill out and they can select and see, well, what are they bringing across the country? And where can I find the best market for my livestock? Very powerful tool for people to be who don't have time to digest a lot of information. They really love being able to go and find information at their fingertips. Next slide, Marissa. And what you're looking at here is just a screenshot of that tool. What Market News has done with our data sources through the APIs, we've been able to provide volume data to the big heavy users, but largely we've left the smaller producers out. And this is one of the things where we can actually reach them now with these data visualizations. Smaller users, they don't need to have the power of analytics to be able to compete in the marketplace. We can provide them access to the information in ways that can help them understand what's going on in their marketplace so that they can compete much more effectively than what they might otherwise do. If anybody's ever wanted to find information looking through 100 reports, believe me, this is a much easier way to actually get the information. But our purpose was to, when we get back, it was to collect and diffuse among the public. And this is one way to do that, not only providing the information, but providing the ability for people to ingest that information and get actionable insight. So next one, Marissa. So to talk a little bit about what this means for the future of Market News. Our goal is to move away from static reports that I think everybody in our lifetime has been familiar with. We're going to try to move away from those more and more and replace those with more dynamic interactions with data. We have many other projects that are in the works. We've recently developed a prototype for strictly a lamb auction and livestock mandatory reporting dashboard. That we actually presented to members of the sheep industry, and they were very happy to see that. Very happy to get that out and get that into their membership's hands. Even after I reminded them that that data was already available to them, it didn't matter. It's what these interactions bring to the table is what people are really excited about. And they really love that. And that's going to be coming out later this year. We're also going to be moving on to the first stages of our livestock mandatory reporting visualizations. Those are going to be coming out. And that's going to allow people to be able to similarly interact with the data in a way that they've never been able to do before. And that's going to get down to the average users out there and provide a much more power to them. So stay tuned with that. We will be moving away more and more, transitioning to more data delivery through data visualization. So that's just a few of the things that I wanted to talk about on data. I think it's very exciting future. We've recently demoed some of the concepts for the livestock mandatory dashboard to some of the cattle groups. They're very excited. And in fact, there's going to be a meeting with them tomorrow to demo it to their larger membership. So without fail, every time we've shown these demonstrations, these visualizations to the industries, they become very excited. They really love this. So I think this is something that's the wave of the future, as you can see across all USDA, but particularly for market news and the provision of timely data. So with that, I thank you and look forward to any questions.
All right, thank you, Mike. Mr. DeCampo.
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank USDA for inviting us to this meeting. I love it as a great opportunity to interact with the ag crowd. My name is Joseph DeCampo. I'm the section supervisor over foods and textiles for the International Trade Indicator Microanalysis branch. As the name implies, we reviewed the data on a micro level for all of our international trade as that goes into our primary product, which is the monthly FT 900. That is a joint release with the Bureau of Economic Analysis and Stats Canada. I do actually have one update this year. We extended our API to data that goes back to 2010. I won't take up any more time. Thanks, and I look forward to a good discussion.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Succinct as usual.
I try to play my part.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I really appreciate the time you put into getting some useful information out in front of our customers here. I hope that also gave all of our participants a chance to think a little bit about questions you might now want to ask of us, because this is the time when we transition over into instead of us telling you what we want to tell you, you get to ask us what you want us to answer. Real quickly, before I do that, I introduced myself at the beginning, and Troy mentioned some of the changes that happened at NASS. You may remember Joe Parsons sitting in this role for the last several years. Due to his changes, I'm now the new Joe Parsons. There have been many, many things that he did not tell me that meant, but we're about to embark on the part of it that I knew it did mean. And that is, instead of, as I've done the last 15 years, answering many of these questions, I now have an opportunity to direct these questions to other folks who get to sit on the hot seat and answer. And I've previewed a few of them that came in. And so, Troy, get ready. I'm just saying. All right. And so one quick reminder to the folks in the room, I mentioned if you've got questions, make sure you use microphone. Melissa has that in the back for us. And oh, Brian's got one too. So we'll be able to get around to you once you raise your hand. You'll remember we did not do introductions at the beginning. In a hybrid environment, it's a little hard to kind of deal with that. So for the folks online, as you've submitted your questions in the Q&A, we naturally know who you are. So that works out really well. But for those of you in the room, if you do have a question, if you could open with introducing yourself, letting us know who you work for, that would be helpful for not only us, but everyone in the crowd as well. And so we will spend some time now entertaining your questions. If you want to think about them in the room, I'm going to go ahead and open with one that we've got online. This first one is from Hussein Jawani. Is it possible for NASS to provide county level data for just the major crops like corn, soybeans, and wheat? Troy,
Thank you, Lance.
you're welcome.
Because of the budget cuts, we have determined not to publish any data at the county level. So prior to NASS actually making that difficult decision, we did a deep dive internally. We lowered our travel budgets. We also reduced the follow-on interaction with producers to encourage our responder to respond to us. But not only that, we shifted some of our training data collection from face-to-face or in-person to virtual. And we have seen some of the dynamic, progression from our sister agencies of what they're doing and how they're disseminating their data. But NASS is delaying / stopping some of our modernization processes so that we can remain relevant, still providing data. So to answer the question is that we have made a difficult decision not to publish any county estimates data throughout this current 2024 production year.
All right, thank you, Troy. All right, we'll go to one in the room here. Willis, looks like you've got. Sorry. There you go.
Willis Kid. I have a handful of questions. I'll start with a couple. So why on livestock do all the other states get lumped into other states, but on crops, some states don't get estimated, but the other states is an interim thing for a handful of states, not all other states?
Right.
Ooh, that's a
Good NASS question.
That's a good NASS question. So I will ask Travis to respond in respect to why we're publishing for other states. And then we're going to ask, if that's okay, to ask Nick to address crops.
Okay, so historically, NASS, we've always done a 50-state estimate for livestock. And so in this transition, as we're moving, what states are being published versus a non-published state, we're keeping the US total still to be a US total, not a 24, 33 state total, because that creates some complications, especially the data series over time. We're trying not to have any distortion of the data. So that's the logic behind that. Is
We have seen some distortion on crops.
I'm just speaking on livestock. So for the perception of the program changes. And so crops, I'll pass it over to Nick for you, Willis, but the livestock, we did not want to change the US total from being a 50-state total to a whatever the number of published states are. So we're keeping that data series intact. Just the number of states being published might differ from historically what we've been doing for the various commodities of livestock. Now here's crops.
Okay, so on the crop side, just like when we did our program review this time around, well, Nick Streff, AS, the acting chair for crops, chief for crops. We try and maintain a certain level of coverage when we're looking at our states. So in livestock, where we had a lot of 50-state things, in crops, we don't have many that are like that. So when we can cut those crops out, we're still covering the majority of the production, whether it be 80, 85%, or either 90% of the production. It's still covered in a lot of cases. So those are the metrics we're looking at when we're doing our program changes. Now in 2019, the program changes were much more significant. And that's why, our principal crop acres really shifted, and we included that slide over time. But also at that time, some of those program reductions were also budget related. We needed to reduce the number of states and programs to reduce data collection costs.
Yeah, and so Willis, just to bump it up the chain a little bit for you. And maybe a little bit more history. One of the issues we run into is in crops, two factors. There's one, so many more crops, and two, there tend to be more frequency of surveys and reports associated with some of these items. And so quite frankly, the cost would be almost astronomical for very minimal gains to expand up to 50 states across all the different commodities that we estimate on the crop side. And so quite frankly, it would not be practical or feasible. Except for, we did make some expansion for you, Marvin. So we can get a happy thumb over here from Marvin, because it was a very isolated, insulated program that only exists once a year for one specific group of commodities. And so we've made some efforts recently to try to even do some expansion from a crops perspective. But again, it's just not feasible because of the volume of effort and expense that would be associated with that. So, all right, Melissa, let's go over here.
Okay, this is going to be kind of a multi-parter, I guess. It's going back to the county yields. Will there be district data produced? I know you said no county yields for 2024. Is it just for 2024 or going forward? Nothing.
It's based upon, in respect to yield, it's
Yes.
based upon budget. Okay,
Right.
so we're going to be reevaluating this for our FY 2025 year.
Okay.
So in respect to district,
Mm-hmm.
if we can get a full cost recovery, so if someone is willing to fund it, we would consider it, yes.
Okay. Because look, one of the reasons why is, of course, my name's Bevan Everett. I'm with
Oh,
StoneX. Sorry, I'm one who didn't introduce myself. You know, I handle and many others in my company and some of the guys in here know deep dives into regional supply is a major factor in making origination plans, storage plans, facility feasibility plans, just all kinds of sort of things during the year. It brings efficiency to the market. And by losing that data, which I understand it's a budgetary thing, it's kind of blinding the industry and graying quite a bit. So much so that you might have read that the NGFA is now trying to take this up as an issue. I was just saying it's an extremely important report. And I was wondering, is the budget being moved around to maybe other efforts? Maybe more pet projects of the administration or something that we're seeing, because I mean, it's an extremely important bit of data. And I'm just wondering, you know, I'd like to have it back.
And I appreciate the comment. Lance, is it okay?
Sure. You know, we'd love to do everything at NASS, right? I mean, if the budget supported it, we're in the business of producing ag statistics. We'd love to cover everything that we can. We certainly did not shift any money around due to any pressures or initiatives from above, sideways, or anywhere else. You know, we received our appropriated level, albeit halfway through the year. As a result of that, we had to make some adjustments in order to be solvent. And
Is there a way that we could get maybe RMA data to replace?
I will defer to our friends from RMA to answer that question. RMA, you're out on the line. Can you unmute and answer that question, please?
Hi, this is Swanta from RMA. We currently do provide county yield information on our RMA information reporting system. You can find it on our website. Just go to rma.usda.gov, click on the tools menu at the top, and then you should be able to locate it in the bottom. And you can download that as an Excel file.
And we'll get that navigation cleared up and we post the Q&A answer. So there should be a link in there for you.
I have never been able to find it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I looked.
Yeah, let me share that comment for folks online. Probably didn't pick that up. There was a comment from the room that and some head nodding that folks have never been able to find that data and have actually been told previously that it's not publicly available. So if it is indeed, we will be sure and get you a link in the Q&A.
Yeah, we can share the links directly to the application.
In fact, if you could drop a link in the chat for us, that would be awesome, and we'll see if we can get that shared here in the room as well. Sorry, the audio's not coming in great from you, so I think we'll do that for now, and we'll see if we can get that cleared up for you for sure. All right, I'm going to go back to a question online. This question is from Sharon Paler. Are there any plans to add animal welfare related questions either in ARMS phase 2 or 3, the census, or other NASS surveys? There is substantial and increasing demand for information about farm management practices related to animal welfare, such as confinement, outdoor access, and there aren't good data sources for this kind of information.
Thanks a lot, Lance. I will ask Brian to see if, his team is actually having that conversation.
Okay, to the present, I don't think we've had many conversations about that specific topic. We do have an opportunity for people to submit and respond to content recommendations through Federal Register notices. So you can keep an eye on those as they come out and are published in the Federal Register. And I'll also maybe ask Kelly if she wants to weigh in on that since we do partner with our friends at ERS on that project.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. We'll make sure that it goes into the transcript, but we've recently released a report on animal welfare practices with respect to Prop 12, and then we have another one that'll be coming out soon as well. So, those good source of information and the data that we use to do those reports will be well documented in that space.
Just to add on that, USDA APHIS NOMS will do some additional livestock studies. That's a potential option to explore the welfare questions for producers in the US if there's any of those concerns, if it's dairy, cattle, poultry, hogs, sheep and goats. They'll do those on a annual basis, one commodity typically on an annual basis, but I don't know if that's in their long-term plan for data items out there, but that's just another source too to explore.
All right, go ahead here in the room.
Okay. I'm Max Fisher with the National Grain and Feed Association. And I hate to keep beating a dead horse on the county estimates data, but we've since found out like over the last week, it's dang near every ag business like grain and feed that uses that data to create little mini S&Ds around all their facilities across the United States. I mean, it's used for, for exporters to determine like their draw area, like what sales they can put on the books in order to be able to export, for processors, millers, you name it, to be able to decide like what grain they need to bring from outside their local draw area to keep their facilities operational. I mean, it is, I guess, a major data set that you all were providing, and it was excellent data and very important. Anyway, just within all the local supply chains, any way that USDA, and I get it that NASS has its budget constraints and it may have to, for this year, come from another area potentially. I don't know. These are conversations that we definitely would like to have with USDA. But like on the RMA data, like I have a question, as to when would that yield data be available? And like on the FSA acreage piece, if we were to combine the two agencies in order to put something together as like a stopgap for this year. If I'm remembering right, their acreage data comes out like throughout the growing season, but the RMA yield data, I'm wondering when does it come out? And anyway, how does that compare, I guess, to when the RMA data usually would come out on the production side, just to be able to put something together for this 1 year? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And just to follow back up on your comments about the Nass County data, we will certainly, consider our FY25 budget next year, hearing all the feedback, understanding the importance of these products, and we'll see what we can do based on where we stand at that point. Quick question out of that for RMA. If you're still out there, if you could tell us when or approximately when that yield data does get posted to the website.
Yeah, can you hear me better now, hopefully?
Yes, that is better.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so to answer the questions, I have put in the chat the link to our reporting system, but our county yield information typically is available between mid to late May starting. But because we're administering multiple area plans, they can differ. It just depending on how early we can get access to that data. So I would say, mid to late May as the earliest every year.
Correct, for the previous season. That's right.
Yes, the previous
Yep.
season.
So following May would be the earliest you would see that. Okay, I'm going to flip back to the online and then I'll come to you next so that we balance things out. Common theme here for NASS. New topic though. Revision, this is from Chris Aggerman, by the way. Revisions to corn production and stocks estimates following the release of the Census of Ag included very small revisions, 10 million bushels or less, to quarterly stocks for the 21 and 22 crop years, but larger revisions for the earlier years, 18, 19, and 20, that significantly decreased the feed and residual use estimates for the first quarter of those 3 years, while increasing feed and residual use for the last 3 quarters of those years. If the Census of Ag collected data for the 2022 crop year only, why were there such large revisions in stocks for 18 to 20 if the census did not lead to significant changes for 21 and 22 stocks? So you want that one or? Okay, I'll take that one.
Yeah, why don't you take that one for us last?
Going to the old guy. So basically the revisions that we made to the earlier years for grain stocks had nothing to do with the Census of Ag. If you recall back to beginning with the 21 marketing season, you'll remember, or at least I certainly remember, that we made some changes to some of our procedures and how that impacted some of those stocks levels in comparison to how we had done things previously. These 5-year revisions that we do following the census, that is the first opportunity we had to reach back to those earlier years and make those adjustments. We wanted to establish a little bit longer history using the current methodology that we had been using starting with that 21 crop season. And so effectively the changes we made in 21 moving forward, we just applied those same procedures to those earlier years at our first available opportunity. And so now you've got that full 5-year span in there where the estimates were set on an even plane in terms of procedure. So it had nothing to do with the Census of Agriculture data. All right, coming back to the room.
Hey, Lance, Ted Seifert. Going back to the county data, sure. Am I to understand that you guys are still collecting it, but just not publishing it?
That is not correct.
That is not correct.
Okay, so you're not collecting the county data. Got it. And secondly, RMA data is great, but historically, I mean, just off the top of my head, I believe there's a pretty sizable discrepancy between what your guys' reported county yields were and what RMA was. I mean, how do we account for that?
So data that's collected using different methodologies will oftentimes have some differences. And obviously we're talking about completely different methodologies between the data that RMA would collect as part of their operational duties, administering crop insurance programs. From a NASS perspective, we're administering surveys to collect data from farmers about the various crop seasons. And so inherently, I would expect that you will see some differences in those data. It does not necessarily mean that they're statistically different. Someone would have to do some analysis to, confirm or deny that, I suppose, but I would expect there would be some inherent differences because of where the data come from.
Well, thank you for keeping our jobs relevant, Lance.
Sure. And just to clarify, when I say NASS is not collecting the county level data, we had to collect additional information beyond what it takes to set viable state and national estimates. It takes more data to support estimates down to the sub-state or county level. And so those additional survey efforts will not be happening. And that's, a big part of what reduced the cost that we save by not publishing county level estimates. And so so all that to say, just to clarify, not doing county level estimates does not have any negative impact on the quality of the state and national estimates because it's a separate collection effort anyway. The procedures are the same, but it's a different set of producers, additional set of producers that we were going to after the state and national numbers were set.
Correct.
And so no negative impact on the state and national numbers. So I think it's time to flip back to online and then we'll come back in the room here. This is from Rudy Arredondo. The Latino Farmers and Ranchers International Leadership are scheduled to be at the Western Growers Association meeting in Phoenix, April 23rd and 24th, and also in Texas for a meeting there as well. Will USDA staff plan to be in attendance with this material and or presentation? USDA may very well have some presence at those meetings. It won't be the same presentations or material, I'm sure, although if there is interest, I'm sure anyone in attendance may choose to overlap some. Troy, you want to add to that?
Yes, please just send us an invitation so that we have individuals out there in basically almost every state representing us. So send us an invitation so that we make sure that we are represented, because we want to attend those types of meetings to make sure that that information that we have, that we can provide, gets shared. So send us an invitation if you email or however you prefer to contact us.
And do any of the other agencies want to comment on that? Sorry. We've been kind of bogged down and asked questions here. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Whenever for these meetings, invite USDA folks, and if budget permitting and whatnot, we're usually glad to attend.
All right, we'll pop back into the room and then I'm scrolling through. I think I may have found a question here that's not NASS. So after this, we'll liven it up just a little bit. And just a teaser for you, Mike, it's an AMS question, so.
Okay, so again, it's Bevan. It's not an ask question this time. We have the expansion of the renewable diesel thing going on pretty big. With the, it kind of sucked up all the bean oil recently. Though the industry has a bit of a failure to launch completely. But we're not really seeing any data collection on it. Last time I think I heard on the last data users meeting was that we just missed the 5-year deadline for collection on that data. Is that true? Because of course it's going to be something that's going to be pulling stocks out of the industry, and we're not going to know how much or where it's going or anything. It's just going to show up as disappearance. Are we looking at putting out any renewable diesel reports? I know we already have biodiesel production numbers, but not renewable diesel.
Do our friends at EIA want to jump in on this one?
Hi, yeah, so we do publish renewable diesel production data on our website. And we have been for a couple of years, and in addition to biodiesel.
Is that just strictly under EMTS?
I don't know what that means.
Just under the RINs, not just actually gallons.
Oh, yeah, it's gallons. We actually go to the renewable diesel plants and tell them to give us their production and inventories and shipments and whatnot, and we publish that data with our other petroleum monthly data.
It just didn't seem like it was matching very well, so that's why I was asking.
All right, back online real quick from Colin Water. Oh, sorry.
Census can add something real quick. Part of the problem, we also don't have any export data. We don't have a Schedule B number for renewable diesel. Part of that problem is some of the other agencies are having trouble writing the language and the statistical notes to actually make sure everybody understands the definition of renewable.
Is there a timeline on that, you think?
Not July 1st.
All right, quick question from Colin Waters online. Will AMS include non-GMO prices as well as organic?
Let me click my buttons here. At this point, we're focusing on organic. What we find a lot of times is organic lends itself in a lot of cases, obviously the non-GMO. And so a lot of times we don't see strictly products that are at that their only attribute is non-GMO enough to get enough to be able to report a regular market on that specifically. So initially it'll be more of the organic. And as we find we can get more information on it for different commodities, and yeah, we certainly would consider it. That sort of work is done under our voluntary reporting, and that takes cooperation from the industries for reporting that. So, but certainly we're always looking for opportunities to expand in that area.
Okay, thank you. I know I saw a hand somewhere. There it is. Okay. Oh, does he have the mic? Ah, there we go.
Hello, Jerry Adele from Midland Research. One quick clarification on this. This whole situation about the county scenario is in the 24 crop year. So we've got 23 county yields, and it's available now that's going to impact us the rest of the season. And then that starting with next February, when we traditionally got these data, would be the one that would be impacting the 24 season. And at this point, hopefully we'll have a budget, ag budget completely. Now we've got a temporary one. I know there's one kind of floating there, but to get this thing reorganized so it's back on schedule, is that hopefully going to be happening? I know that we're dealing with a Congress that doesn't have a lot of connection in between. Is that the real issue that we had here, is the fact we got delayed for a year and maybe more? This is really going to Lance. He's the only one that's, we can always get the Will Board in here too.
So you're correct that from a crop perspective, it starts with the 2024 crop season. So you're right, with the exception of cotton, and I think rice is still coming for the 2023 season, and those will still happen. And that's because the data collection efforts have already been completed for those. And so the earliest we can really affect is the work that we're starting now or very soon that would support those efforts for the next crop season. And so there is still a window where we might be able to, get something done before the 25 crop season kicks in, or 24 crop season kicks in, FY25 budget related. But that window is shrinking.
That is correct, because we are planning for, it doesn't just happen overnight. So we are planning for, preparing for the county estimates for crop year 2024. So when we don't get the funding for this, then then it places us in a situation where our staff is not, is as if we're scrambling to get something done. Okay, not saying that it won't be great and fantastic, but we are still, preparing for this 2024 crop year. So that's what we're doing right now. We're planning and preparing, getting our questionnaires in order, getting our methodology in order, and that's what we're doing. But when we say that we cannot do that, so then we stop meeting and having those conversations. So that's what's going on right now. And we realized that, when we made this difficult decision, because we have conversation with industry folks that comes in and tell us and share information with us, how they are utilizing that county estimates data and how they're taking this information and looking at around their different facilities. But we have that. But this is the difficult situation that we were placed in. And when we received this budget allocation of $187.5 million, that was appropriated by Congress. And then eventually it just gets trickled down. And that's what happened. And, and that's not taking into consideration the 5.2% pay increase. And in 2023, our budget was $211.1 million. So that's a decrease. We have a census bump in the 2023, but it wasn't that big. But I'm just think throughout the process, it placed us in a very difficult situation, because not only, we would love to get our budget in October, but when we get it in March, it put all of us around this table in a very difficult situation that we had to make decisions that was very uncomfortable. And we met on a continuous basis because we stopped doing some of our programs to make sure that we are progressive, our innovation projects. We look internally before we start publishing data. We want to make sure that if we want to publish data because it makes us relevant. Because we don't want to publish something that somebody's going to place on a shelf and nobody uses. We have heard from the industry folks many, many times, basically almost an hour after we put that publication, that notice out. Somebody sent us an email basically saying, why are you doing this? Well, you're putting us in a very uncomfortable situation. But we were in a very uncomfortable situation when we had to make that decision.
All right, going online to Carl Scold says for ERS, please consider breaking into a smaller file, the zip file of US meat, livestock, and poultry trade. The zip file would be much easier to use.
That is noted, and I'm looking at one of our staff who's in the room who's nodding as well. So thank you for that comment. We'll take that into consideration.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, looking around the room. Got a couple of hands going up. Oh, we got one over here, close to the mic. Okay.
Josh from COFCO International. Just a question for ERS on the oil crop yearbooks. So for feed grains, you guys do it, you update once a month, but for oil crops, it's once a year. Is that gonna change possibly in the future or thought about changing in the future?
That is a good question. I don't know if that came through online, but I'm going to just pause for a second. We've got a number of folks online. Is there anyone online who could speak to the yearbook and the release, the oil crop yearbook and release?
Yes, this is Molly Burris. I don't know if, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go right ahead.
Okay, so oil crops, when they put out their monthly outlook product, which is a report, they do release smaller files of data on the report page. Those may be of interest to you. But as far as the yearbook, that's a file that we do not have any intention of currently producing more often. Those are calendared items, and you can see the calendar release date for the entire year on our website. I will note if it's, and you could reach out to the author if there are specific data points you're interested in. That Maria Bukowski or Bryn Swearingen would be the best contacts for that. I will mention to Carl, we have discussed many times before that file. I think you're talking about the Livestock International file, and it's a very big file that's created for end users who are usually pulling it into R or Python or some other statistical package. There are some workarounds if you want to reach out to Grace Grosson, that author. We're happy to show you how to open that file, but there are also smaller Excel files for, you know, other users if that would interest you. It's the same data. So.
Thanks, Molly.
Anytime.
All right, I'm gonna pop back online for a question from David Widmar for FSA. With ARC and PLC promoted as a risk management program / tool for producers, is it possible to provide the county level data, specifically yields, before payments are made so producers can plan, budget, anticipate potential payments? So Tim, can you take a
Hey,
crack
Lance.
at that one, please?
I'm here. Is my audio coming through okay?
It's a little weak, but you are coming through. So if you could speak up or get closer to the mic, I think that'd be awesome.
Okay, let me do my best here. David, I'm gonna drop a link in the chat. Last month, we posted the county yields and base acres for 2024. So we do have a public website where we post that too. We posted an update for 2023 crop year yields back in January. So I think what I'm trying to say is we are posting those yields online. However, I just want to remind you or bring to your attention the ARC PLC program, it pays in arrears. So the October payment run we just had paid on crop year 2022. So is the yield data for 2024 or 2023 going to help you plan to plant something or to change your decisions on planting? I'm not sure. you know, if that's going to work, like maybe you're thinking it's going to work. Does that make sense?
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
I will drop a link in the chat. You can get to that yield data.
Okay. We will do that. All right. Let's grab one of these folks over here.
Hi, Brian Carroll, Citadel. So I wanted to build on the question around renewable diesel and the importance of that build out. Good question. I think really good answer. There are good resources and better resources than we used to have, and still some deficits. One of the deficits I see, I think, could potentially be met by changing or improving the existing NASS fats and oils report. That was thankfully taken over after a few years after Census dropped. That long history here. You know, in a nutshell, one of the things we've noticed is that yellow grease has gone to being suppressed in the production and stocks categories. An idea potentially to address that could be to have a total fats and oils production and stocks, and suppressing some other minor oil, so that we're not flying completely blind to these very important categories. Be interesting to hear what's driving that and how it could be mitigated. The other idea I'd throw in here on fats and oils is expanding the number of respondents to be more representative of the modern makeup of the industry. So any comments around current scope and ability to expand the report to other respondents?
I'll start first. We've had many conversations centered around fats and oils report. That's an interesting conversation of basically saying, combining it. And then I would love to continue the conversation with you during our breaks, because it's a conversation that we would love to engage more in, because we see some of the concerns that we have when we're publishing that data and some of the challenges associated with it as well. Because when we publish the data, we want to make sure that it's defensible and that it's a true reflection of what is actually being produced. Okay, so that's one item. I'm not sure if Nick, you want to add anything to it?
Just a few weeks ago, we actually had a meeting with two industry groups to come in and talk about, and we specifically were talking about that yellow grease area. And Dave Caldwell, who puts together the report, and Natasha, I guess it just kind of comes down to is getting industry support to get regular reports from everyone every month to get it consistent enough. So we've reached out to those industry groups to help us kind of promote participation in the survey. And so hopefully we can start to publish that more regularly. At least that was the goal behind those talks.
Yes.
Is all of that data available in QuickStats? Because I was having difficulty getting some of those fat categories pulled up in QuickStats, but I will admit that I may have been looking in the wrong area, but like yellow grease, for instance, I couldn't find that as a commodity.
So if we're publishing it, it should be available on QuickStats, but we will make sure that we verify it. Okay.
Yep, very good.
Yes.
All right, last question before break. Not last question. I don't want to be getting too wound up here. Well, maybe we might get more than one in. We'll see. This is for the world. But it's not the one you're thinking of, so it's okay. All right. Can you comment on which provinces in Brazil are believed to have larger area and or yields for soybeans and corn than CONAB is estimating? That's why I said we might not get another one in before break. The question is from Chris Eggerman. Sorry.
That's a good question. Joanna, you want to take that?
So thank you, Chris, for that question. We have several years of higher crops than cannabis going back. We reconcile our crops using Abiobi crush data and official exports. So turning your attention to last year, the crop of 162 million tons, we had to raise several million tons this past fall because we were seeing record exports and strong crush reported by Abiobi. So to cover the crop, we had to reevaluate both area and yield for last year's crop and several prior years' crops. So where that area is, I mean, we can only speculate where it could be with the expansion of the northern ports, but we don't actually know where that area expansion is. Yeah,
I guess the only thing I would add to that would be, given second crop corn acres and how they typically follow soybean acres, the same logic would be true for corn area as it does for soybeans.
Follow up on that. You're looking
Oh,
at-
hold on for the mic. Let's get a mic to you. Sorry. I want the folks online to be able to hear. Just got a follow-up coming here.
I understand that you have there's a spread between the two. But there was kind of a consistency of a few million metric tons. Now we're looking at 11.25 million metric ton difference between Brazil's total corn crop and USDA. And then we're also looking, what, 8.5 million metric tons. So you're looking at a multiple 2-3 times the difference of a number. And that would be greater than the entire carryout in the United States or, you know, whatnot. It's a material amount. So it's either one of the greatest misses by CONAB or there's something going on here because it's going to make a market moving difference. And just kind of wondering, because CONAB mentioned about smaller acres in their last note. Well, USDA mentioned more acres. So we even got 2 different government agencies saying things are going a completely different direction.
So on soybeans, when we were reconciling crops after we were getting use data, we had to raise the crops. We raised the crops both on area and on yield. So for several years, we have a higher trend yield going into this year. And we also have a higher area. We have more than 500,000 hectares or 1.5 million acres higher than Canabi does. And so that's part of the reason why our crop is so much bigger this year. Our year-over-year yield decline is that the percent decline is pretty much similar to Canabi's, but we're coming off a higher base both on area and on yield. And our area and yields can be found for anybody who's looking for it on the PS&D website at FAS's website. So you can kind of see the differences between what we're showing and other sources are showing.
And on the corn side, I would say, obviously, given the constraints in the balance sheet, there's a little more subjectivity there, right? You have use categories outside of exports, which are estimated, but it's not like crush and exports for beans. You've got most of the administrative data accounted for minus some stocks, right? So on corn, it's a little more, how do I say? There's a little more variability there and a little more subjectivity. However, the other thing I would say for the current crop this year, remember, we're just going into it's peak safrinha season, and it's natural to have differences in expectations in crop size. And of course, we look at Canabi and they've got a 32 million ton export, which relative to we're carrying is 800 million bushels difference in exports. So yes, your point is well taken on implications for price on the corn side. So, but time will bear out how that works out. And I will say too, I don't view this as a binary, we're right, they're wrong kind of discussion, right? Because we're talking about Brazil and there's probably, it's not nearly as robust in terms of data sources as say what you have with NASS in the US, right? So, and the same would also hold true for Argentina as well. So.
All right, last question before break. I'm going to grab one from online here. This question comes from Dan R. From Michael Sheets with AMS regarding the pivot from static data to interactive dashboards. How long is that entire rollout expected to take place for? And will the static data still be regularly updated and available via the APIs, or is that also being phased out?
Oh, no, I mean, the static data is going to continue. That's the basis of what we do. We collect that data. The data visualizations, that's just going to be a different way to present the data. The APIs will still be as they are. The only change you're going to see is more data going to be available as more data gets into our data engine. So you're actually going to have a problem with more data moving forward. We're not cutting back on anything. So the statics here, it's just a different way to present the data.
All right, thank you, Mike. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a 20-minute break. So here in Chicago, that means at 3:15, we will start the discussions back up. So that is 3:15 Central Time. So 20 minutes from now, we will rejoin the conversation. So look forward to seeing you all back then. Appreciate everybody coming back. We still got a few questions left, so I think we'll be able to fill our time fairly well. But if you've got more in the room, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you sprinkled in here as well. For AMS, I've got a question from Joel Mayo. Two questions, in fact. Number one, you mentioned earlier a lot of your static PDF reports will be moved to visualizations. Will the data driving these visualizations first be moved and made available via your API? And I'll let you answer that one first, and then I'll answer the second one.
Yeah, it's going to be concurrent. I mean, obviously, as the information gets into our data engine, it'll be available in all formats, API, and then eventually in the data visualizations as those are developed. It has to get into our data engine first before it can go anywhere. So.
Right, makes sense. And then the second part of that question, you had a V2 API that had the endpoint discontinued. Will all new data be available via the 1.2 API, or is there a new API in development as well?
Well, here again, you're going to have to go on this. I started with AMS 40 years ago before we had computers, so I'll try to figure out this talk. I'm told by our experts that we'll support all API versions that are out there. We're currently, I believe, on 3.1, if that means anything to the questioner. And we'll continue to support those, at least for the time being.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I believe we've got a question in the room.
This is Karen Braun from Reuters, and the question is for Joanna and Mike. And I want to go back to the Brazil discussion, because obviously you can look at the corn and soybean balance sheets between USDA and CONABI, and you can see that the production estimates are different, the export estimates are different, the ending stock estimates are different. And so it makes sense when you look at, the bigger picture, not just production. And then, of course, when you look at the year-on-year assumptions of, yield and production, they do somewhat line up with what CONABI is saying. But I think it would really help if you guys could clarify just how USDA does or does not use intelligence, I guess, gathered by CONABI, because I know that in some countries, USDA will adopt certain estimates of those agencies, and in other countries they don't. So it would just be helpful to know, do you adopt anything that CONABI says? Is there any overlap? And how do you, kind of reconcile those differences?
So I think I've said before, it's always all available sources. Now, of course, CONABI is one of the primary sources that we would look at, because they do a complete estimate of production for all of Brazil, right? You could have AMEA for Mato Grosso, you could have Doral for Paraná, you could have FAMASOL for Mato Grosso do Sul, but those are just for those individual states. So the reason why, and we've always kind of, I guess, the history has been that we've viewed CONABI as being the best relative for all of Brazil. Now, of course, you understand that when reconciling, and this is probably more of a bean thing than a corn thing, when reconciling
the prior year's crop with the administrative data, the usage in particular. It just, sometimes it doesn't fit together and it just doesn't work. And usually, as I mentioned to you, by that point, most people that are in the market, you're trading, if you're looking at it, you're not, I mean, it's not really something that a lot of people pay attention to if we're having to make adjustments to back year crops. Some do, but many do not. So that's our prior, if you think about it. So knowing the track record and knowing where we've been over time relative to cannabis. And again, this is probably more a bean thing than a corn thing, but it certainly informs how we would judge where we want to be and where we're forecasting going forward, right? Does it make sense? There's always going to be an element of subjectivity in what we do, right? This is in contrast to what NASS does, where they go out and collect survey data and they put out survey-based estimates, right? There will always be an element of subjectivity in what we do relative to, say, NASS. So did you want to add anything to that?
All right, thank you. Back online while we move the mic around to the room. This one from Haley Zhao for ERS. When will the food availability per capita be updated? Last update was April 14th, 2023.
That's a good question, and I'm going to ask if we have anyone online that has the response on that. We do tend to do those annually, so it sounds like we're due for one, but I don't know specifically a date. Anyone ERS online, food availability data?
So if we do have an upcoming date that is scheduled, that will be available on the product page, even if it's not on the calendar. And I did check for food availability. It doesn't have any release date right now. But the author information is there. Was working with Linda Cantor on the documentation, so I know that they're working on it. There was a similar question about the the fertilizer use and price data. And that's the same scenario, and that there's no date posted yet, but if you look at our data product quality page, that review is posted because we recently reviewed that product, and they noted that they're working on improved machine readability and documentation and new file format for that. So that would be the answer to that one as well. I know Roberto Mosheim is working on that. So it relates back to Carl's question about the machine readability. We're still working on making sure we have the best available file formats for the end user on those.
Very good. Back into the room.
Yeah, Ted Seifert again. Going back to the Brazilian production numbers, in particular, I think more soybeans, but for the fact that you've had to go back and raise previous years, does that have an influence, or does, in retrospect, does that mean that in your mind you should have had a higher beginning number for this year coming in? And is that kind of sort of explain the reluctance to lower it any further than it has been?
Yes, we should have had a higher starting point. I mean, after realizing that the back year crop was 162, after reconciling it, we wouldn't have started the out year crop at 163 where we started it.
Right.
So you kind of reevaluate throughout the year as you're raising the back year crop, being like, wow, there must have been more area or higher yield. And so there was a bigger crop. So coming into the out year, we had to think about what is the offshoot from the back year when thinking about the declines in yield in certain parts of the country and where area has expanded.
Can you share with us what that number might have been, if not 163?
No.
No. I have a number of 171, but that's just me.
That's great. That's
Okay,
wonderful.
let's use that. Thank you.
All right, going back online. Juan Quintero, does RMA webpage have an API to retrieve data?
No, we currently do not have an API.
Okay. Good. All right, we'll go back online real quick and then we'll come back to the room. This one is from Kathy Myers. Is it possible to get more granular data summarized in the quarterly grain stocks report?
More granular data. Wow. Um, at this particular time, having this information, at the national and state level, is I think is actually very good. So, unfortunately, we will not be able to provide this information at a more granular level.
All right, back in the room, Willis.
Willis, good. I guess I'm going to start with Mark on this one. The program crop that we talk about the least at these things is probably cotton. And it's getting to be where late in the season, one of the most volatile components of the cotton balance sheet is the residual in recent years. And I was wondering if there was thoughts about how we can track every bale ginned, we can track exports. The domestic usage is very accurately tracked and yet have this large residual. And if there's any effort underway in order to try to reduce this residual component.
Good question. And that will be one of the first tasks for our new cotton chair. And I have to say, I don't know enough about the, unfortunately, we don't have a cotton chair here to answer that, but I know that Steve, they've struggled with, there's tracking exports is complicated and, the way he uses, export sales versus census data, there's some discrepancies there. There's, for a product that is, pretty basic, that you'd think you'd be able to count every bales, there's still a lot of uncertainty there, a lot of judgment in the balance sheet. And unfortunately, I don't have our cotton expert online to address that directly. But like I said, we have a new cotton chair. Hopefully we'll have a new cotton chair within the next couple months, and that's something that he or she will be able to dig into.
All right, let me pop back online. I've got a question here that I think everybody can maybe take a crack at. So I'll shake things up a little bit. Mark Richards, this is his question. It seems that everyone is working on data modernization, but there also seem to be concerns about data availability and budget. Are the data modernization efforts also currently constrained by budget? I'm trying to think about what kinds of timeliness to expect these modernization efforts to be on, and if these modernizations may lower the cost of data production. So Patrick, I'm going to let you start if you have any modernization efforts you want to focus on, because we haven't picked on you yet today. I was starting to worry about you.
Yeah, I'm still here. No need to worry. So, yes, I mean, budgets and reduced appropriations are affecting everyone, including FAS. In terms of data modernization, we're modernizing our export sales reporting system, as I mentioned earlier. That's not the type of modernization I think that most people are referring to here. But yes, I mean, it is modernizing the system to make it more efficient for our exporters and for our staff internally. We have APIs that we've had for years. They're there, they're available, and we'll keep those maintained. We've got, our systems, PS&D and GATS that have been around for a long time. They're in need of modernization. I don't think we have the resources to attempt those right now, but if we had funding, those would definitely be on the list because they're very long in the tooth and need some updates. So, we're not, I think what efforts we have internally to try to do visualizations and things like that, we're just trying to do what we can with existing staff, but we don't have resources to take on major modernization efforts at this time. So I think I'll stop there.
Just roll down the table.
Yeah.
And we haven't forgotten about you online either.
All
So
right.
AMS and FSA, we'll get to you.
Yeah, for the World Board, keep in mind, like I said in my introduction, we really only produce one set of data. That's the data that goes into the WASD. We do our, we put that information online, we make it as accessible as possible. But then we rely on coordinating agencies like FAS to put out the PS&D, which, again, is constructed as part of the WASD ICEC process. We rely on ERS to put out detailed feed grain databases and whatnot. But, beyond just putting out the WASD, there's not a whole lot more that we're trying to do. We even have a link to the ERS WASD visualization on our WASD page. So that's, again, just the way we rely on our sister agencies, our coordinating agencies, to really handle that data delivery aspect. Anything beyond the basic WASD, and other than that, we don't have any. Given that we don't have any other real data modernization efforts underway.
So the budget has basically slowed, somewhat even stopped some of our modernization projects. NASS started collecting our data online probably about 15 or so years ago. But that's 15 or so years ago. We should continue modernizing our processes. So we have farmers who would love for us to provide their information online. We also have farmers that would love to provide us information still if we're mailing out the questionnaire. So we have to meet our respondents where they are. So we have to continue defining ways and opportunities for them to provide us information, the best way for them to provide us this information. So we need to continue modernizing, but because of our budget situation, we have been slowed down because of it. But not only that, but let's think about how we're analyzing our data. We need to think about how we are, what we have done to how we can bring it into the 21st century, making it better, how we're analyzing and processing our information where it's more efficient. But not only that, but then we think about how we're disseminating the information and how we make it, providing that number, what the number of acres of corn. But we want to make sure that whatever that data point is, we want to place it in a situation that it just comes off of that page where people can relate to that information. So has it basically impacted us? Yes, because we have slowed and basically stopped some of our processes because of the budget constraints, because we want to make sure that we continue to provide relevant data. And that's key for all of us. We want to make sure that we're providing the relevant data so that we don't be in a situation where we're talking about, more commodities that we had to cut because of our budget constraints. But the answer to the question is yes. And it is impacting throughout our entire process for NASS.
Thanks. Yeah. So for ERS, just to give you a sense of perspective, our budget appropriations this year was a cut of $2 million. And then you've heard mentioned that there was the salary increase. So it effectively reduced our budget by about 5%. The approach that we've taken in this modernization space is that we have several different pilot projects that we've been investing in over the last couple of years, looking at some of our more popular data products that we put out and what do we need to do to modernize them so that they're accessible to everyone, but also so that the processes are more efficient. And so we've made some investments over the last few years, and we're literally at the point now where we're starting to roll those out, understanding what we've learned and how we can take this to more of an enterprise level across the agency. And that will take resources. We, of course, hope that there's some efficiencies that are gained there. So for instance, I mentioned earlier in my remarks, staff time being reduced from things taking several days to put together to perhaps a few hours. Obviously, if you can do that at an enterprise level, you start to save time that you can allocate to other spaces. We're also evaluating, making sure that we have the right expertise on staff to do these kinds of things. And so we have a lot of, subject matter experts. A lot of the tools that we're talking about are in the technology space. And so we're looking at making sure that, as we're evaluating these pilot projects, we have the right expertise on staff so that we can, again, take this to an enterprise level. And we'll continue to do that. These mostly have been in the pilot space, although there have been a number of ways in which we've rolled things out on the website as well. Do you want to go online first, or you want
You can go ahead, Jim.
Hi, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not actually part of the staff that would handle dissemination on these sorts of advances. But I do know, like I said, we have an API. There are some visualizations that have been added to the FT900. a year or two or so, we added the advanced FT 900, which gives you an estimation of the monthly data about a week to a week and a half before actual report is published. And they recently put out the annual economic indicator report. That's a way, it's kind of a visualization, but it's a way to put information about international trade, wholesale sales, and retail sales all kind of in one space, so you can kind of see how the pieces fit together.
All right, Tim, you want to comment for FSA?
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully my microphone is better now. Change mics. I don't know if that helps.
A little hard to hear you. Sorry.
Okay, that's unfortunate.
That's a little better.
NSA is constrained by budget on our data modernization. I do think that what we're doing is increasing our efficiencies, though. I think what you saw in our presentation today is that we are posting these visualizations online, and a way you can get to them. Any of those visualizations we've looked at today, whether it's the dairy margin coverage or emergency relief program or any of the other dashboards, at the bottom, the down arrow, if you click on that, you can download that data that makes up that dashboard. So that's one of the ways that we're able to deliver data in the new technologies that may be helpful for you guys to consume that data. That's what we're looking to do across the board as we launch new programs, is provide more data transparency, use the new technologies that are afforded to us through the data modernization efforts so that you guys can more easily get at that data. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And Mike for AMS.
Well, first of all, I mean, AMS can commiserate with the panelists. Yeah, fiscal, budget restraints. We were fortunate enough to have some visionaries in AMS that a few years ago, we started investing in a standardized data collection and retention system. That was the front end, and thankfully that is nearing completion now, with just remaining commodities to be going into that. Once that's completed, the step into the data visualization and the other means of sending out the data, that's not, the amount of money and funding that's needed for that is not as much for us. Thankfully, we have some really good, capable people in-house with good expertise that have a natural curiosity and affinity for these things. And they've taken to designing a lot of our own, out of our data visualizations. They built the cattle contract library. And I'm proud to say they built that within a month of getting the directive from Congress, and 9 months from that point until it went out. They developed the livestock dashboard, and they're developing the other one. So AMS has had the benefit of having good in-house expertise. I don't know that we could do that depending on outside contracting. So we put our money in the data engine, and then we're using our in-house expertise to move forward with the visualization. So the hardest part is largely behind us.
Okay. Very good. There's your modernization update. So that's good. Did I see a question over here?
I got two. First off, to Michael and Joanna, I'm kind of curious in regard to Brazil, and I don't want to run this in the ground, but this goes back, and I remember something that was told to me a lot of years ago about a firm that Reuters ultimately bought, Landworth, and Landworth was doing a lot of remote sensing to come up with acreage data, and acreage data that was in fact really very good for the US. Are you guys using any remote sensing data just to look at area of crops down in Brazil? We certainly use it as part of our monthly process, as you're probably aware. But in terms of specifically at a more micro level, no. At least as far as area goes, certainly as part of the yield component and that analysis that goes into it. But in terms of an aggregate area, for a state like Mato Grosso, for example, Yeah, I just remember at the time, and this go back probably 10, 15 years ago, Landworth was questionable on yield and production numbers, but their area numbers were really spot on for the US, really very, very good. And you know, when you're looking at this dilemma, the thing that's always puzzled me, we look at Brazil, much like I harken back into the 1970s, you know, we got production data for Russia. It was always how many metric tons. Nobody bothered to look at area and yield and separate them. And, you know, here we are today, we're looking at Brazil and even Argentina. We're looking at production number. We're not looking down at area and yield, or not emphasizing area and yield enough. And, you know, I think you have to really separate those two components to really come up with a good, accurate product. And that may be one thing it's done. That was just a question, you know, just harking back on something I remember from years ago. Joanna, you know, as we talked earlier, I said, you know, I'd really gotten interested in the last year looking at the renewable diesel industry and trying to understand the folly of renewable diesel. Sorry, folks, I think it somewhat is that. The one thing that I find it's really lacking everywhere is any attention, any focus on projecting available feedstocks. Everybody looks at where we are today. Everybody will look at the potential demand coming from the RFS, RVOs, but nobody really comes up with the idea, you know, do we have the feedstocks to even meet that? You know, I know Scott Irwin in the winter seminars he did in Illinois, he said, you know, to meet the number, I think, for renewable diesel by 2030, we needed to add something like 7.5 million acres of soybeans, you know, and I'm sorry, folks, acreage doesn't fall out of heaven like manna anymore. We don't have it. So where do we get that? And why are people not really putting an emphasis on really forecasting feedstocks? And I'm going out just a few years. I did notice that FAPRI down at the University of Missouri recently put out a set of numbers, not comprehensive, not totally, but they did look at a bit of the feedstock component for renewable diesel. You know, do we need to put more effort into that to help people understand what's going on in that industry? And we haven't even touched on SAF.
Yes. That's a great question. It's something that we're always trying to get our hands around, is the total feedstock pie, whether it's in the United States or it's outside the United States. Within the United States, you know, we can have a pretty good handle of the supply of veg oils. And outside the United States, like in Canada, we can have a pretty good idea of canola oil supply and crush capacity expansion and canola oil. But when it comes to imported feedstocks, like tallow and used cooking oil from other countries, that we don't have as much of a grasp on. And there are other organizations that are, you know, doing studies to find out how much of these, you know, how much used cooking oil exists outside of the United States. I mean, one thing that we've tried to track is just trade of it and how much of it has been diverted to the United States and how much more it could be diverted to the United States. But it's something that, yeah, we would love to have a better handle on the feedstocks outside of the United States. But in terms of projecting, particularly soybean oil for biofuel, we have, you know, forecasts for biofuel production in the United States that's tethered to policy, to the biofuel mandates, as well as the change from the blender's credit to the producer's credit, which will have, you know, less of an incentive to use veg oil feedstocks as opposed to use cooking and oil and tallow. So having a handle on how much availability of those other feedstocks is important to know. So it's something that certainly we'll have to look into more. It's kind of just like a lot of other analysts outside of USDA. I feel it's just, people have been surprised about how much has come, whether it's tallow or used cooking oil, into the United States. So.
Quick follow-up. Get your mic there, Jerry.
Just a quick follow-up, just to understand, I understand how how soybean oil and coke oil can easily move into a energy source situation. I look at tallow, I look at yellow grease, things of that nature. And that is where this supposed conflict is outside sources from China and other places coming in there. How does that get suspended and how does it keep moving in the energy world? To me, that seems like, one's solids, one's liquid. Maybe no one here knows exactly how that's going to keep suspended. So I'll guarantee a diesel engine is not something you want to get screwed up with, particularly as how advanced they are right now. You got to make sure whatever you're putting in there is exactly what they need. And so has anybody got a thought on this whole scenario? I know the world has a lot of extra grease from Asia and every place else, but I don't know how much extra we have in the US.
Well, yeah, it felt like not a question. But one thing I'd like to say is a lot of these facilities have pretreatment facilities built onto them. So they are treating the feedstocks that come in to make sure that they can come into the facilities and not, hurt the process. A lot of the facilities will start off with kind of veg oils just to get the process moving, and then they'll work in more of those lower CI feedstocks into their process later on as they use their pre-treatment facilities.
But the other problem is the whole world is looking at renewable diesel and biodiesel too. So is that supply actually going to be there to be imported into the US?
Was that a question?
All right. I don't think we're gonna solve that one. I'm gonna go online quick and then we'll pop back up here to the corner. I got a question from Tanner Bamer. Regarding the canceled July cattle report, has the process for collecting and aggregating that data not already started? It seems the work to prepare that report would already be underway. If so, can that really represent a significant cost savings for the service?
So, yeah, so that process has not already started. And that's why we took that in. That's why we discontinued that survey. If it had already started, it would have continued. So just like many of our other surveys. So it has not started, which gave us the opportunity to discontinue that actually July cattle report.
All right, thank you. Back up here.
You recently, I don't know which agency put it out, but recently there was a report put out that 4 million acres went into some sort of program funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, with like some of the majority of those acres into Kansas and Texas. But totally I think it was carbon related or whatnot. At the same time as we've seen, like with the March acreage report, a loss of principal acres, I think around 6 million, if I remember correctly. Is the IRA program, it seemed like it was a CRP carbon related item. Did that affect principal acres this year? This new program we've never had before? Or do you have kind of an opinion on kind of why we saw a loss of principal acres? Because of course we had like 90 million corn acres, which was below the average trade guess. I know profitability has not been great for corn this year, but just kind of wondering if these new investments and other programs have been kind of siphoning off principal acres.
Hopefully it has not, but Nick, you have a comment for us? Thanks for the question.
In terms of our other programs pulling the crops out, I mean, they could be, NASS wouldn't know that part. We're talking to the producers, how much corn are you going to plant? Your soybeans you're going to plant. We're not asking a separate piece of your other acres, what are they doing? There's not a survey question on there. And our principal crop acres have varied more over the years, prior to, 2018, 2017, they were pretty static. And over the last years, you think of the weather events we've had, it certainly jumped around a lot more. But if you look in our executive briefing for the March report, from March to final, the acres, they go down for weather events, but they rarely go up a lot. And that's just what history is telling us.
Right. Well, it seems like you have like 12 million acre swings from time to time, even just from year on year. I think what we peaked at 2012 is what you could call the acre pool, which was the CRP plus principal acres plus prevented plant. Seemed like we had the most acres at that time, and then it's 35 million less, 12 years later. So, I mean, I understand urbanization in there, but it just seems like we have a lot of volatility. And this year we've had lost of 6 million year on year. So just wondering if CRP or IRA was kind of stealing acres or not.
I guess. I don't know if anybody from FSA can speak to any additional acres that they've seen there.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. Marcos has a similar question in the chat about the Conservation Stewardship Program and EQIP and some of the NRCS programs. I don't have a direct answer for you. I can take that back and see if we have any insight on that. I wouldn't know off the top of my head if that's occurred or not. I don't have any data to support it if I was to say something.
But I will say in 2012, we had a major drought situation at that time, because I remember the 2012 Census of Agriculture and the prices that reacted as a result of that. So we did have a severe drought in 2012. Okay.
All right, popping back online quick here. Got a question from Jackie Holland. For ERS, are there any plans to reestablish publishing fertilizer production, supply, and usage data similar to the fertilizer use and price report last updated in October of 2019?
Okay, I'm going to go to Molly online. Molly, can you take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mentioned that when I was answering the last question, but we did a recent review of that product. So if you go to ERS data product quality page, you can see the review posted online there. And what that says is that the authors are going back and they're updating the documentation to make sure, as someone mentioned before, that the users can actually use the data we're putting out, but they're also updating the file formats for machine readability and for accessibility. So I don't see a date listed on that page either, but when they have a secure date that they know they can meet, we usually post those on the data product overview page. Or that's Roberto Mosheim. He's listed as the author there. You could reach out to see if he might have more information.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Okay. All right, we'll go back over here online again from Amy Smith. Any thoughts about capturing pricing related to Prop 12 or Question 3 pork cuts? It's currently embedded in a weekly specialty report and not clear if it's Prop 12 related or organic or any other niche pork item. We have cage-free egg pricing. Will pork evolve as well?
Yeah, the answer for that is we are tracking Prop 12 pork data through the livestock mandatory reporting system. And we are tracking that, and the packers are identifying that product. The problem at this point is that we haven't reached the gravity to be able to report that as a separate entity, what with confidentiality. So for now, while we're reviewing at what point we'd be able to do that and break that out, that is an internal discussion that's going on, but we certainly are tracking the data in the interim. And we've made that data available to within the department for the Office of the Chief Economist and for some other purposes for studying that potential impact in the marketplace. So not yet there, but we're working on it. One of our concerns is to the extent that animal confinement legislation becomes the rule of the day. There's been other things on some of those reports that they were new, they were different, and then they eventually just became commonplace, and breaking them out made no more sense. But we're certainly looking at it.
All right, thank you, Mike. Another question online here. Ashley Hembrow asks, will cropland cross be updated? And that's, of course, in reference to the discontinuance of the county level estimates. Yeah, I didn't know the answer to that for sure either. I was hoping one of my NASS colleagues knew. So we'll be sure and get that included in the answer for you, Ashley. Okay, let me mark that off. All right. Michaela White asks, is there still a plan to add a fertilizer economist to USDA staff to improve the availability of information relating to fertilizer price and usage data? Not sure. Is anybody aware of any plans there? I hear the word economist, so.
I know. You're
Okay.
economist and I'm racking my brain for. I mean, we do have fertilizer subject matter experts on staff. I'm not aware of plans to expand beyond that current expertise unless the person asking the question is aware of something I'm not aware of. But we do currently at ERS have subject matter experts in fertilizer space.
Very good. All right, question from Austin Schrader. The cold storage report has several of the meat stocks broken down by region. However, pork is not one of them, or at least not that I can find. Is there any way to find that data?
Travis, would you respond to that for us?
Unfortunately, due to disclosure confidentiality, we're unable to publish the data at a regional level. So you just have the US component. So appreciate the question.
Okay, Jerry?
Yes, question back to ERS. You've had quite a tumultuous 5 or 6 years. People out of town, establishing the location. We were eventually going to have a meeting down there in Kansas City this couple weeks from now. Anyway, in your own experience in that, some of them moved back, things got together. Where do you feel about your agency right now, how you're producing the things that you want to produce after this upheaval over the last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. ERS is in a great space right now. I would say that in terms of productivity metrics, if you will, we've rebounded and we're producing, at or above where we were pre-relocation, which was 2019, for those of you who may not recall. So, that's a pretty good rebound. In terms of our staffing numbers, we're about at 285 full-time equivalent staff, which is a little bit lower than where we were just prior to the relocation. But, we've just kind of made some shifts and such in that space. We still have the headquarters facilities in Kansas City, downtown Kansas City, although the footprint's a little bit smaller than we anticipated because of the pandemic and the move to many of our staff to remote duty stations. So we have a presence in DC, we have the presence in Kansas City. We make full use of both of those spaces, but we also have staff in about 30 states. And so we're more of a distributed workforce, which has, benefits and challenges for sure. So agencies in a really good space from, my vantage point.
Okay, we'll shift back online here. Excuse me, question from Peyton Ferrier. Declining response rates for the ag census have been a concern for several years. Is this still a concern? And has the 10-year US Census seen similar concerns with response rates?
I'm not sure.
Troy?
It is a concern because, we have seen a decrease in our response rates. And that's an environment that, we would love to have more data, especially publishing at the county level. So we are putting processes in place so that we can try to increase our response rate throughout the US. So that's why we're trying to be progressive and instead of reacting to this situation. So it is a concern, but we're trying to change it.
Okay. Back over here, Mark Fight. NASS, is there a breakout for crop acreage used for cover crops?
There's not an official estimate on cover crop acres.
Yeah,
Here we go. We'll let you re-ask that.
Oh, is it the person's asking a question about if it's Timothy or if it's alfalfa or it's Rome grass? Is that what that question was? Oh, sir. What was the question?
Well, I already marked it as answered, so it's gone from my screen. However, I read it exactly as it was written, which was simply, is there a cover crop breakout at the data at NASS? I suspect the question ties in with, obviously we report acreage by crop, but we don't report whether it's planted for the purposes of a cover crop or other uses. And so that we can at least speak to. And that's what Nick was saying, is we don't identify those planted acres by what they're for.
Direct that to FSA, because doesn't FSA collect a lot of that data?
So the question for those online that didn't hear was, should that question be directed to FSA, because they do deal in that space? So Tim, I'll let you comment on it. The question as worded was very specific to NASS, so that's why I sent it that way, but I think that's a great idea. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Lance. I agree. It was directed to NASS in the question. I guess I would encourage the person to ask that question, go to a Google browser, type USDA FSA crop acreage report. You will find our public postings out there. Last one was in August. Next one will come up end of July, 1st of August. It does break it down by crop type and intended use. So there is a cover crop, there's a crop type of cereals and other grasses or mixtures or legumes, and there's intended use of cover crop only. So I do think it depends on what they meant by that question and what exactly they're getting at, but I do think if they're asking in terms of FSA's crop acreage report, that is at the county level, and it does have cover crops and intended uses. So that may be helpful to them. That may be actually what they're looking for.
Lance, can I add to?
Yep.
So a little bit of shameless promotion here, but today's chart of note is on cover crops across the United States. So it's a map. Go ahead and take a look at that. It'll point you to the research that we've recently done on cover crop trends, and that may help the person who's asking just dig down a little bit on their information. I was able to pull it up on my app while I was sitting here.
Well played. Well played.
I did not plant that question.
Excuse me, back to a new question online for AMS. On the weekly actual slaughter under federal inspection report, hog carcass weights are reported as whole numbers. Would it be possible to report those to one decimal place? The increased granularity would be very helpful to users.
Well, all things are possible. We get that information from our partners over at NASS, and we can work with NASS to see whether or not that's even possible to provide that. And if that is, then we can look at adding that to the report. It shouldn't require too much major modifications, should we be able to do it, but yeah, we certainly look at it.
Okay. All right, looks like we're sticking with the online questions. All right, from Bill Lapp, which agency, NASS or EIA, is going to step up and be a statistical hero by starting to collect soy oil stocks at biodiesel / renewable diesel plants? Who wants to be the hero?
I will step back and let EIA be the hero.
EIA wants to be a hero. Yeah, we are aware that there is interest. And I know you guys have heard my explanation about forms clearance. 2026 is our next opportunity to make changes to the survey form. If anyone interested in said changes, if they email EIA-info-petroleum@eia.gov, we'll get it on the record that there's interest from industry. That will help bolster our argument.
Thanks for the question, Bill.
Okay. Let's see. Here, looking around the room. No. Sorry, I'm trying to skim past the county estimate questions that I think we've probably sufficiently beat down. Let's see what else we've got hidden in here. County estimates, county estimates, county estimates. NASS, please continue the July cattle and county estimates. We got that message, right, Troy?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I thought so. Well, this one's county estimate related, but let me ask it anyway, so our friends over at FSA can weigh in on this. Even though it's addressed to NASS, the question from Mark Fight, what does it mean to not have county field crop data? Will county data be available, or sorry, for RMA? Didn't mean to tease you there, Tim. Will county data be available for crop products?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So all of our crop insurance program uses crop insurance data. We do not use NASS data for our crop insurance program. So we get that questions a lot, and we just want to make people aware. Your crop insurance products are fine. You know, we have the data to be able to continue with those programs.
Yep.
Thank you for the questions.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for providing that clarity to folks. I think we answered this one earlier, but I'll throw it out there from Lane Acker. Are there concerns over data quality for crop production as NASS eliminates county data? Will that lead to additional large revisions in production estimates in the future? I think we answered that earlier, that the additional data we were collecting to support the county level estimates was not feeding into the state and national numbers anyway. So the answer would be no. There are no concerns over data quality there. All right, anybody in the room yet? Nope, I didn't want to ignore you. All right, we got a few minutes left. We're getting close. All right, let's see. All right, from Michael Harris, will NASS leadership, FSA, ERS, rural development, et cetera, help share the good news, in quotes, of USDA equity report implementation during our new national Juneteenth holiday, both in Washington, D.C. and at our California state capitol on Juneteenth? I don't know if we have any current. Will we be sharing the good news of the USDA equity report implementation at those events? And I don't know for us.
I assume they're referring to the Equity Commission report.
I believe
Yeah, I mean, we're really proud of the report and taking the recommendations seriously. But I don't have specific information on ERS participating in those events.
Correct. Anybody else? Probably similar, I would imagine. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we got one in the room. Outstanding.
I heard you looking, so I figured I'd try to help. This is Brian Carroll with Citadel. And one of the questions I had is are there any circumstances in which a grain that was required to be inspected before export, soybeans, corn, wheat, would not be inspected if loading onto a seagoing vessel, Panamax, or even a train for that matter? So here's why I ask. So one of the things that I've occasionally found over the course of time is that grain inspections will be less than the amount reported by US Census for export. And sometimes that noise comes from Mexico and Canada, but other times it comes from other trading partners. Let's say, for example, US soybeans being shipped out of the US Gulf to China, for example. And so I'm trying to think, is there a circumstance in which a cargo of soybeans being shipped to China would not be federally inspected under FIGIS?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody from FGIS that's on the line. But we can certainly make a note of that question and see if we can dig an answer up from them.
Well, I'm wondering if that could be the case. So in other words, is there any reason to think that grain inspections would be understated?
Now, Brian, are you talking both imports and exports or specifically exports?
Specifically on exports.
Well, the number one is, as people have been saying, is train. Something could board a train and then go to Canada and then go over there from Canada. So since it was on a train crossing the US border, it wouldn't get inspected.
And it would still be counted as a US export destined to China.
Should be.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Back online, this one strays back into the world of program cuts, but there's a little bit of a angle in here that I'm not sure we've commented on yet, Troy. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it. From Dan O'Brien, were the data product cuts announced by NASS brought before public groups for review or before congressional representatives review, advisement, and consent before being decided upon by NASS administrators? The move has provoked a strong negative response from U.S. agricultural constituents whom NASS is tasked with serving. I don't think we touched on that particular aspect of it, but it is something we've talked about. So do you want
Yes.
to comment on that?
So, and we can tag team it, Lance. So when we made a decision with, and when I say we, meaning within NASS, when we made a decision within NASS to make modifications to the programs, discontinuing those items that we have already listed. So we shared that information basically with the public at that time. So so we didn't have a conversation with congressional. Okay, so that was internally within NASS. So we were looking at our budget and we were making those difficult decisions and what we can basically make modifications to. And what data points also support those projects as well. Because sometimes we have conversations about, why didn't you cut something else? Well, some of those things are basically only one data point. So when we made those decisions, it was internal within NASS.
Yeah, and so just a couple of points I'll tag on to that. We tried to keep in constant communication with various industries across agriculture. We try to use forums like this to try to gain understanding as to what is important. And in fact, while we're here together, I think this is a good opportunity for us to remind you to help keep us informed on an ongoing basis about what's important, what you need, what you're relying on, how you use it, things of that nature. So we do try to keep that communication alive, but when it comes down to those final decisions that have to be made, trying to do that in a quote open forum type setting, in my opinion, would probably be a disaster for a couple of reasons. One, I think somebody described it as, basically the Hunger Games approach, right? Because we could take a room like this and somebody's going to say, don't you cut that? And somebody's going to say, don't you cut that? I mean, you're going to be competing, right? And that's not a good scenario. And even maybe more important than that is so many of these reports and data series that we report are highly market sensitive. And I think if we start to have a discussion in an open forum about what we possibly might be cutting, I think you might call that market mayhem. And I don't think that is us serving folks in a good way by causing market uncertainty and market volatility just because of what at that point would be very much like rumors and things of that nature. And so, big picture, yes, we try to keep people engaged and try to make sure we know what's important. But when it comes decision time, we really have to isolate a bit more and make sure we insulate from what's happening outside at the time.
And like I mentioned before, my staff and I, as well as with Lance, we sit down with the industry and they share with us what information that they value on a regular basis. So that communication is really what we need, because people constantly ask us, who uses your data, and the value of your data. And sometimes we don't know exactly who uses the information. We provide that information to the public at the same time. You know, at 12 o'clock, not 12:05, not 12:10, because if it's 12:05, I'm having a conversation. Okay, so at 12 o'clock, we provide that information to everybody. And that's what we're trying to do, because at the end, we want to make sure that, you know, we're listening to our data users so that we can make sure that we remain relevant. And I understand, you know, I've had many of these conversations. I understand the situation.
All right, got a couple of hands in the room. We're getting close to the end here, folks.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how much money can we save by getting rid of the December WASD report? I was just trying to make sure that it worked. Yes. No, but seriously, I mean, nobody cares.
Right. Well, seriously, none would be saved because people are still going to get paid, and you know, we're here to do the work. So you know, we can't fire everybody just for December and then hire them back in January.
Sure,
So,
of course.
Go ahead, Marvin.
Lance, as a follow-up to the previous comment, I don't think Congress has put to bed the Farm Bill just yet. And I don't know whether there's anything that we as constituents of our congressional delegations might comment to them. I know that's different than appropriations, but is there anything in the dream world that would help if we still had an opportunity to add to the Farm Bill?
Anybody want to bite on that one? Everybody's a little nervous about that one, Mark.
I know I know why you're nervous, but I'm one of your constituents and I have other people.
Understood. Understood.
We appreciate the support.
That's what I did.
You can ponder that, Julie.
I just had a follow up on, this is Julie Ingerson with Reuters in Chicago, about the cuts of the cattle report and the county data. You said you were communicating with the industry, but I feel like those announcements kind of came as a big surprise to the industry. So I was wondering if you had any more specifics on who you engaged with before making those decisions. Thank you.
And when I mentioned that we communicate with the industry, not the fact that we were cutting the reports, we have conversations with them and what they value. Okay, so that's prior to this conversation. So we are always engaging. They come in and visit us. So we did not have a conversation with the industry, basically informing them prior to our announcement that we were discontinuing the July cattle report or any of the other programs.
Yeah, just a general comment that effectively we try to maintain relationship with the industries, I think is all we were trying to communicate. All right. Anybody else, anything new in the room? I've got another question I'll read online and we're getting really close to the end here. From Rudy Arredondo. How does USDA plan to reach out to ethnic communities since 70% of Hispanic operated farms, 66% of American Indian or Alaska Native owned farms, and 62% of Black owned farms have internet access? I think that might mean
FSA. And then we can do NASS.
Anyone want to comment? I know from a census perspective, right? You want to
Yeah,
answer that
I'll
from
go
our
ahead.
perspective, Troy?
So from a census perspective, we reach out to the community-based organizations.
Yep.
We have conversations as well as meeting with those individuals. Not only that, but we also have a meeting where we gather those individuals together to talk about supporting our programs, encouraging their constituents, their stakeholders to respond to our surveys. And after that, we're going to have a virtual community-based organization meeting, sharing with them the results of how they can leverage this 2022 Census of Agriculture and this data and this rich data set. Like I mentioned before, we have over 6 million data points in that publication. And how can they leverage that? How can they utilize that to benefit their, to reach their stakeholders? So that's what we're planning on doing. But not only that, but we realize that this is a partnership. This is a relationship. So we don't reach out to just those individuals during that particular time. We want to make sure that they know that they have a partner throughout the year, not just during when we're collecting data. So because of our relationship that we have, and we have our partners in those state offices, reaching out to them, making sure that they are going out to their meetings, attending, meeting with them on a regular basis. So we want to make sure that this relationship that we have as a part of within NASS, that is something that we value. And we want to make sure that we continue it because it's something that we want to make sure that we collect and we capture. We can capture it correctly, not just in the Census of Agriculture, but all of our surveys. And that's what we do. We have this relationship that's continuous on a continuous basis.
Okay. FSA or AMS, did you want to comment on that before we move on? No. Okay. Well, looking at the clock, I think we're going to kind of wind things down here. There were a few more questions online that we didn't get to. We will, as I stated earlier, absolutely get answers to all of those included in the Q&A portion of what we post on our website. As I mentioned earlier, we'll certainly post the recording of this as well as the slides we shared at the beginning. And actually, we're now posting the book that you received as well. We loaded for the last, I think 3 years. Out on the website here within the last few weeks, and this one will post out there as well. So as we kind of wind things down here, first of all, I want to certainly thank all of our panelists, as well as the supporting staff that were here from USDA to help answer all of the great questions that we got from everybody. So thank you to everyone there. Also, I want to thank all of you as attendees who are here, whether you're here in the room in Chicago or online. We certainly recognize that your time is valuable, and for you to set aside some time this afternoon to come here and share with us what's important to you is really a big deal to us, and we certainly appreciate that. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the folks who actually made everything happen here. It's easy for us to sit up front here, but none of this works if we don't have people like Marissa, Melissa, who are both in the back of the room up here in the corner, and then also Vincent, who is completely behind the scenes, but probably solving many of your problems online this afternoon. So a huge thank you to them. We certainly could not have done this without them. As we wrap this up, we've always, I think, taken the opportunity to put in a little bit of a plug for, the importance of the people that we serve, right? And also the importance of getting the data that supports all these programs that we're up here talking about. And it's very obvious that these products are important to all of you. And so we would just continue to encourage you to help communicate that with the folks that you work with. Oftentimes there can be a bit of a disconnect in the people that we're communicating to gather that data and the importance of it. And so anything you can do to help keep that effort moving forward, we would certainly greatly appreciate. And then, as I talked about just a few minutes ago, I think, in light of where we are today, I think it's even more important than ever that you keep engaged with us, keeping us up to date on what is most important. What are the things that are essentially critical that are coming from the programs represented at the front of this room and from our panelists online today, so that if and when we do face additional challenges, and let's be honest, we're probably going to face additional challenges from a budget standpoint, whether it be soon or later or both. And so the more informed we can be going into those processes, hopefully the better decisions that we can make. There's still going to be hard decisions, but that's the world that we live in. And so we're here to do our best and do everything we can to help keep things moving in a positive direction. Obviously, when it comes to this meeting in general, we want to get your feedback on that as well. This was a hybrid event, and if you haven't picked up on the trend, what we do in the spring is we do a hybrid event, and then in the fall, we do an all virtual event. So that's certainly our plan for this year as well. This fall, we don't have dates yet, But once we do, we'll communicate that. It'll be an all virtual event. And what that means is it will also give us the opportunity perhaps to have some breakout sessions again. We typically do that in the fall when it's all virtual, because you can imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to do that in a hybrid environment. So we don't do it in the spring. And so again, share any feedback with us. And quite frankly, if there's anything that you think would be a very valuable breakout session, share that information with us as well. And we'll keep that in mind as we plan for that fall meeting later this fall. So with that said, I'm going to bring things to a close. And again, just say thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's not make this just a conversation for 1 or 2 afternoons a year, but let's encourage each other to stay in communication and make sure that we're sharing with each other all the things that need to be shared. So thank you so much. That's going to wrap it up for today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.